that way, but like I always kind of force myself to have something small because like if I don't, then I know that just in a few hours when I'm busy doing something I can't stop to take a break and eat, then I'm going to be starving. So it's just a thing I do. It's fine. That's just what breakfast is for. You're not supposed to go all out and eat like fucking 5 plates of pancakes or anything like that. We're live,
And
by the way.
I was like, and speaking of delicious morsels and less delicious morsels, hello everyone. We're here to talk about the Acolyte. Yay! Aren't you so excited? We're thrilled. Look at us. We're smiling.
Yeah!
We're not dead inside at all. It's fun.
Yes! I should clarify for those because I did say in my last stream that we're doing these in 2 episode increments. This is not a breakdown. I have a lot of notes on episode 3 that I've taken because I've seen the episode twice now. We're not breaking down the episode. I wouldn't even know where to begin to break it down because there's a lot of missing context that I'm assuming is going to be filled in with later episodes. This is about one very specific thing that happens in it that we're going to discuss with people who may or may not agree with us because there's been a lot of contention and online discussion about it already. Jolly, I said this to Andrew in one of the chats. I don't know if you're in this chat that I said it in, but like my
abandoned.
You might be in it, but you're just never talking it. Whatever. The point is, I have a theory, and I've kind of had this in the back of my mind since like before the show even came out. But like once this episode dropped, I was like, this all just, like it just came together for me. It really clicked. Do you remember when they said before the show, like in the marketing? They were like, yeah, they're like in episode 3 specifically, like that's going to have things that's going to cause like hardcore diehard fans of like the originals to like lose faith in the show or whatever. Like that's going to be the point of the show where like new fans stick with it and old fans kind of just lose interest. Right. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do remember this. In fact, I remember this in the chat as well. You're right. It's one I just don't talk in.
Right. Yeah. And I remember seeing that and I was like, why would you say that about it? Like you don't want to market your show that way. Why would you advertise that being a thing that it's going to like alienate older fans? And then I realized the reason that they said that was because that would make it so that everyone going in to watch the show, going in to watch episode 3 would be primed to be looking for, okay, what about this episode is going to like turn away older fans, right? And, you know, then it was the very obvious thing that happened in the episode. And now, like, people who were already set on defending Disney Star Wars are going to be like, well, yeah, that wasn't that big a deal. They blew it way out of proportion. And everyone else who's blowing it way out of proportion is blowing it way out of proportion. And then on the other side, there are going to be people who are like, oh, this breaks everything. Oh, dear. They were right. Like, and they already kind of had it in their minds that, like, oh, they did say this was the episode that would break everything. And look, here they've broken everything. And so then you have these 2 extremes that are even more extreme than normal because they've kind of been pushed in those respective directions. And so now a lot of conversation is being generated and a lot of debate. And it's kind of already now the show has cemented itself as like, that's probably going to be the thing that everyone talks about forever. It's going to be the fucking space Vespas from Book of Boba Fett or the trench coat scene in Kenobi. Like one specific thing out of an entire show that everyone endlessly debates about.
Yeah, it does seem like Disney, either Leslie Headland herself or Disney at large, and honestly, it could be a combo or just one, have basically gone like, we have designed this to deliberately piss off both sides as much as we possibly can and try and stoke as much of a contention between them as we possibly can because, you know, any press is good press, right? So the more people are talking about the show, the more people are going to watch it, and the more money we make, huzzah.
And it's also just a good way to like set people in their ways. Like if you were already predisposed like toward defending this show, then you're going to now. And you're going to fervently
to take their
shift whatever you have to be like, look, this makes sense and this is why. And then people on the opposite end are going to do the exact same thing but go, this can't possibly work and I was right and the Acolyte is bad and woke and blah 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 blah.
Yeah, they primed everyone to take their priorly unknown positions on the stage of the culture war. Like, all right, everyone, that's your places. Get there ahead of time so we can start the yelling match early. Like, the thing is though, like I'm not baffled because I know exactly. I've seen too much of Disney shows and the response to Disney shows now to be surprised by the idiocy on both sides. But in a way, I still find it like darkly funny that we're in this position where like what's basically happening is we're sat at a dining table, and like the waiter has brought us a platter of shit, and we have one diner. We've got two diners with us, and on one side they're like, "Oh, this is the most delicious shit I've ever eaten," and on the other side they're like, "Oh, I can't believe the waiter who brought us this shit was black," and you're just sort of sitting there being like, "What the fuck? What's happening right now? Are we not going to talk about the fact that this is shit and that it's tastes like shit?" No, apparently not. We all have to, admire the fucking drapery and piddle about in the margins of things that really don't matter. Like even, I said this to you earlier, even EFAB are getting frustrated with this, which is saying a lot. Like where they were, someone was bringing up the fire discussion, the fucking fire in space discussion again for the umpteenth billionth time. And they were like, it really doesn't matter. I'm like, yeah, no, it really doesn't. Please, can we just talk about things that actually do?
Can we talk about how like every single scene in all three of these episodes is contrivance after contrivance after contrivance, and characters making decisions that like are just the stupidest, most illogical decision that anyone could make given the motivations established for them? Can we talk about how like I don't even know what the show is trying to accomplish thematically because it's so muddled in this ridiculous plot?
Yeah, it is. It's really terrible. And because obviously we're here today to address the very specific. And again, like this argument has almost become endemic of the phenomenon I just described, right? Of like the people just ride or die dick riders just like defending this for all it's worth, and then the people who don't really get it either, but come at it from the other angle, are trying to use this to be like, you see, they're assassinating a white character by doing it. It's like, oh my god, no, let's talk about the mechanics. So yeah, sorry, I'm kind of rambling now. It's the specific thing we're talking about, of course, is what episode 3 brought up, which is that May and Osha are born of a virgin birth. They have been created using the Force. They are a miraculous / immaculate conception. Discuss.
Jedi Master Soul asks, I think it was Soul, right? Or Endara, whoever. They ask who is their father, and the witch mother who runs the cult that Osha and May were born into says they have no father. Which, you guys might remember from a certain movie that came out 25 years ago. There was a similar exchange between a Jedi and a virgin mother.
Yeah, there absolutely was. And that's the thing, like, it's not just that, like, it's the same phenomenon. It's that they're very clearly aping the same, like, language. Like, they're trying to remind you of the Phantom Menace when they bring that up, right? It's not subtle.
I mean, like, they have a scene later where Osha and May are, like, being tested by the Jedi to see if they would make good initiates. And, like, they're given the exact same test. They get Torben pricks Osha's arm and, like, takes a blood sample. Same as Qui-Gon and Anakin. It's the ship, the cup, the speeder on the screen that Mace Windu's holding, like the same exact test. They're really trying to be like, you remember in the Phantom Menace when this happened to Anakin? Yeah, it's happening to them also at around the same age, at an unprecedented circumstances,
Only with a marginally higher level of stupidity, because at least the prequel Jedi, were like, how do you feel about your mom? We need to probe your attachments. Whereas this time around, they're like, oh, I know you love your mother, and that's going to be a problem, but don't worry, come with us to Coruscant. That'll be cool. It's like, oh, okay.
Not only do we know you love your mother and are deeply attached to both her and your sister, and basically all these witches who have raised you, but like at the end of this episode, when they all die horrifically in a fire and that traumatizes you immensely, we're just going to overlook that as well. We, the Jedi, who know fully well that happened to you.
Right. And this... I guess this is the last thing before we like set out the stall and try and invite people on, right? Is like a lot of people have tried to make the argument that like, oh no, just because they're an immaculate conception, they're not, this isn't a chosen one narrative. The Jedi don't necessarily think they're the chosen one. And I'm like, but then why would, like, if the Jedi seriously don't believe that Osha is the chosen one or has anything to do with that prophecy, why did they make an exception to train her given the incredible amount of things stacked against her in that regard? Like the traumas, attachments, her age.
I mean, there's a lot of different angles to this too, because like even if they're like, no, I mean the Force didn't create Osha and May, it was witches. That's just a thing that witches can do. Then like Qui-Gon could be like, oh well, it's possible that Anakin was conceived by the midichlorians, and Windu could just be like, it's also possible that he was conceived by witches. So, that's nothing. That means nothing to us.
Yeah, basically what we're saying is a lot of people have been sitting there being like, wait for the context. They're going to, don't take anything for granted. And the problem that we're pointing out is no, what they've already given us that is concrete is unfixable, right? No matter what context they try and supply to put a slant on it, this has already got very bad implications, damaging implications for the Phantom Menace and the prequels, and by extension, the saga as a whole. That's the stall we're laying out anyway. And so, yes, what we're going to try and do today is, if you are in chat and you genuinely like the episode, and or you genuinely don't think that what they did in that episode was an issue, we are inviting you to come on, and we will try and have a very civilized and polite discussion where we try and get to the bottom of whether or not it actually is an issue. And maybe we'll all have some fun and learn some things along the way. And yeah, maybe Sheev and I will have our minds changed, and maybe this episode will turn out to be fantastic. I'm not holding my breath on that, but maybe.
I would also like to really emphasize, because I already had someone who's backstage come on that I'm pretty sure we weren't going to have a meaningful conversation with, so I kicked him. No offense to Groppy, Sheev Talks Hate, whatever. He doesn't watch Star Wars. He doesn't watch any of the new shows, so like, he's a friend. Despite his name, he's a friend. But I kicked him because I don't imagine that he's going to provide like any kind of actual real defense. Like, maybe he could have, but like the point of this exercise is like, if you've seen the episode, if you are in any way invested in like defending the Acolyte, like truly defending the Acolyte, with like, you've seen it and you have all these references that you can point to, like, you are allowed to come on, but otherwise we don't want to, waste time, I guess.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Of course, should no one turn up, which is perfectly fair, that's everyone's right. If no one wants to come and debate, that's cool. But if that happens, what we'll try and do is like pull up some of the arguments that we've seen commonly put around the place, and then like we'll politely try and discuss them. And I mean this seriously. We're going to give them the due consideration of our full intellectual weight, for want of a better word. We're going to try and see if they actually do hold any water and discuss them reasonably. But we would prefer it to be presented by someone who is not ourselves. So,
well, yeah, that is one of the reasons why we're even doing the stream, because again, Jolly said, we both said, really, like, both sides have been primed to take their most extreme positions and just kind of like hurl shit at each other. And we don't like that. We don't like when people do that. We don't want that to be the only discourse happening around this show. So like, if you present us an argument, we're not just gonna be like, "Ha, you're wrong." We're going to try to actually meaningfully address what you're saying, okay? And I feel like that's worth making clear. If you're someone watching the stream right now who maybe saw me link it on Twitter or something, you don't typically watch my content, and you want to see like what this Sheev guy is all about, I don't like to just, be an asshole and like belittle you for your opinion, okay?
Yeah, despite my incredibly smug, posh-sounding voice, I'm in the same camp of Sheev and I are basically, and have been for a while, trying to set out this place on the internet where we try and actually have a meaningful discussion about media and just leave all the kind of bullshit at the door, because it's just so distracting and unhelpful for actually trying to get to the bottom of what makes art fun to engage with. Which is all we really care about. We're not here to try and score points. That's just I don't, trust me. I have a high enough opinion of my own intellect that I don't need to score points about it on the internet. No offense to everyone.
Anyway, so yeah, I have linked the invite to the StreamYard room that we're in. We already got a few people backstage, but like it's linked and it's pinned. So if you have a genuine disagreement with us about this specific topic, please do not hesitate to come on in. And with that said, the last thing to lay out, last time we did 20-minute increments for debates. We didn't feel that was quite enough time. We felt like we were having to rush a lot of people out. So we're going to try to do 30 minutes this time, see if that's better. But obviously you don't have to stay on for the whole 30 minutes. If you've run out of things that you need or want to say, like, we'll just kick you. It's nothing personal. We don't like you. You smell bad. Yeah. Then. All right. So our first person is Wanderer122, who is currently muted. So if you'd go ahead and unmute, please.
Hey, wow. I didn't even think I was able to be on here. I'm sorry. One thing I agree with the whole idea that the witches making children by themselves ultimately cheapens like dark play. I heard someone brought this up in a comment I was reading about when someone recently reviewed the episode 3, and what I noticed was that this ultimately cheapens like Darth Plagueis's like ultimate like achievement in the Legends continuity, where he ultimately was able to create life out of midichlorians from the birth of Anakin Skywalker, which I ultimately feel is cheapened because some people theorize that this might ultimately mean that Darth Plagueis learned this method through the witches instead of his own like abilities himself.
Okay, well, I mean, there's two things I'd like to address about that claim. First of all, Darth Plagueis and Sidious didn't actually like directly create Anakin with the Force. That's a misconception I'm seeing going around from what I'd consider our side of the camp. What actually happened was they were like messing with they were trying to create a being of like pure Force, power, energy, whatever, and they were messing with powers they didn't understand. The Force retaliated by creating Anakin. So like they didn't create Anakin. It was the Force that created Anakin.
I'm sorry, I didn't even know that part.
No, that's fine. I feel like that is worth making clear because a lot of people seem to believe that is what happened. That Plagueis like just directly created Anakin, which first of all, that's from a book that's not canon anyway. So we try to not really.
Yeah, I was about to bring up that bit as well, which is like the other side of that is whilst it's it's perfectly fun to have a discussion about whether or not this fits the EU or whether the EU did a better job in some regards. When it comes to discussions of the Disney shows or the Disney canon, we don't. It's not really fair to like point to the EU and be like, oh well, they've contradicted the EU. It's like, yeah, of course they have. It's a different continuity. They're under no obligation to stick to the EU so long as what they write is good. That's all we care about.
I understand completely. Yeah. That's only what I really had to talk about. I'm really surprised that it got on here. I'm sorry. I felt like I was just totally surprised. I'm sorry.
No worries.
I actually just to talk. I want to say also I've watched your stuff recently, and it made me really rethink other things about the Clone Wars. And looking back on it, it was kind of flawed in certain senses. So yeah.
Oh yeah, thank you.
All right.
And the inhibitor chips are good.
Honestly, yeah, I don't want to derail that, but I agree with your point about that as well. So, see ya.
Okay.
All right. Well, it was really lovely to meet you. Thanks for coming on.
No problem.
One other thing I was going to say about that though is like I actually also don't agree with the position that it cheapens. Like even if we were in with like Plagueis did figure out a way to create Anakin or whatever, like I don't know that it's necessarily like cheapening his achievement if like someone else had figured that out previously, or if he learned that from someone else previously, necessarily.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, the necessarily is the qualifier that I think is important. Because yes, I agree with you that I don't think it is intrinsically damaging to Plagueis as a character or as a legacy. Presuming Plagueis even exists in this continuity beyond being a legend that Palpatine invoked.
Mm-hmm.
As long as just the fact that someone else had an ability before somebody else, or someone learns an ability from somebody else, doesn't cheapen their achievements. Like for all we know, yeah, these witches made Osha and May, but they're peanuts in power compared to Anakin, and so like Plagueis took this and really elevated it, or something. There's any number of things that could be the case here.
Which that is a defense that I've heard some people make, though, is that like Osha and May are not as powerful as Anakin, or like not even powerful in their own right. Which, I mean, I guess we'll wait for more to like see how well that's defined. But like, I'm pretty sure there were a lot of hints in Episode 3 that like they are exceptionally powerful.
Well, Anasaya literally says to Osha, like, you're a very powerful girl. Now, of course, she could just mean relative to normal girls.
Yeah.
But the question then becomes, like, again, exceptions were made for her by the Jedi, and her twin sister was recruited as a potential Sith. So the implication is they are very powerful, at least in potential.
Yeah. Now, before we get our next guest in, there were 2 super chats that we've had that I don't want to just skip over. So one for $10 from Wisdom Minari. Thank you for the super chat. Saw someone losing their mind because they're Night Sister lesbians and that the show is making Jedi seem like trigger-happy cops. They're making the Jedi seem like the bad guys. Still a bad show. Great. I'm so glad you brought this up because these are both topics that needed to be addressed, I think. First of all, obviously, the fact that the Night Sisters or not even Night Sisters, that the witches in the show are lesbian. I don't care. It's not a big deal. Obviously, again, you see people on the anti-woke side being like, not only are they undermining the chosen one thing, but they made it gay. And it's like, stop.
Yeah, we kind of addressed this at the beginning, but it's just such it's so boring to see. Like, that's the thing. I'm not even angry anymore or frustrated. I'm just getting bored when people bring this up and they're like, oh, the lesbians did this. Like, you see one is doing the rounds right now, which people are like, oh, I think was it Az or someone like Az was like, oh, they're saying you can make a baby without a man. And I'm like, you can do that now, dude. It's called IVF. Like, the fuck are you talking about? I just don't get it. I just don't get why people lose their minds over it like this. It's got nothing to do with anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the whole like Jedi being made out to be the bad guys thing. The episode itself seems to be totally confused with what it's trying to do with the Jedi, I think, because like on the one hand, you do kind of get the idea that they're trying to depict it as though like the Jedi are overstepping their bounds. They are like technically speaking breaking the law by like even interfering on a planet that's not within the Republic, but like they're doing it to impose their own, religious agenda, whatever. But then at the same time, they're also treating it as though the Jedi are kind of like the good guys in this situation who are trying to help. And I'm really not exactly sure what the episode is going for itself. Now, as to the meta of it, of like, oh, the Jedi are supposed to be good guys, stop trying to make them corrupt and evil or whatever. It's like, did you miss the prequels?
Yeah, the whole point of the prequels was that the Jedi had become systemically corrupted because they become embedded in a systemic corrupted system, a systemically corrupt system. That's a tautology. You know what I mean? A corrupt system.
And that was mainly supposed to have happened over the course of the last 1,000 years since the extinction of the Sith. And we are at like what, year 850 of that 1,000 years. So like we're pretty far along.
Yeah, the Jedi have become firmly entrenched in the political machinations of the state, and that has made them worse and not, has corrupted their sense of purpose and their sense of morality in quite profound ways that will come home to roost in the Clone Wars.
Like I'm already seeing, because like there was that one tweet that was shared around that was like the Jedi are good, end of story, with like the clip of Luke saying I'm a Jedi like my father before me. And I'm like, I do genuinely wonder sometimes if it's like, is that what people just perceive the Jedi to be? Like just fully objectively good, benevolent, perfect, like wise warrior monks who've never made a single mistake in their lives, and they're like,
and who
no corruption,
send children into battle.
Yeah, it's like in that movie, right, where Luke declares himself a Jedi, like his father before him. Why do I keep saying the father? Like I'm talking about God. In that same movie, the two remaining Jedi that exist from the Old Order are urging him to kill him and not take that path that Luke ends up taking. Like the Jedi were fallible. That's okay. We're allowed to let that be a thing in the story, I think. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I'd like to point out, because people are trying to actually, that sounds a bit uncharitable. Let me rephrase that. People are putting forward the argument that like, oh well, the difference is that in the prequels, sure, they were corrupted and they weren't at their best, let's say, but there's a difference between them being shown like that and being shown as being like incredibly incompetent / outwardly evil. And as to the incompetence point, I mean, I will agree with you that I think Disney canon in general portrays everyone as being incredibly incompetent, and that's enormously frustrating. But that's not limited to the Jedi. That's just everyone in Disney shows is bad and stupid at their jobs. As to the evil remark, though, like I don't think I've actually seen anything that these Jedi have done that I could call evil or that is out of line with something that the prequels Jedi would have done. I mean, Mace Windu and the Council were literally planning a coup. And that's before they even knew Palpatine was a Sith.
Yeah, well, when they found out he was a Sith, that obviously accelerated the timeline. But like, they were already planning to like carefully remove him from office and sort of just take control of democracy. So
yeah, they literally, what's the exact line? Like, the Jedi would have to like secure would have to like capture the Senate in order to secure a peaceful transition or something. And Yoda's like, this is taking us to quite a dark place. Maybe we should rethink this.
Yeah, like I think the most quote unquote evil, I won't even say quote unquote, this is pretty evil. I think the most evil thing that any Jedi in the show has done so far is Vernestra being like, yeah, by the way, I don't plan on giving Osha any kind of fair trial. We're just gonna kind of like, make an example out of her. Hush her up. Yeah. That's pretty fucked. But again, I would consider that pretty in line with the Jedi as we know them from the prequels.
Oh yeah, I mean, particularly when you take things like the Clone Wars into account, which unfortunately is canon, so you kind of have to. Like, you look at some of the decisions the Jedi make, where they're just actively sending, like, civilians into danger or withholding help from civilians because they're like, well, it doesn't, they tolerate slavery on their borders.
Yeah,
there's all sorts of things that are not good.
Yeah. So anyway, that was I have two more to go, so I'm going to speed through these real quick. From Roger Moore for $5. Thank you for the super chat. So what happens to Force users rejected by the Jedi? Are there any examples? What if they're powerful? Why would the Jedi allow renegades? So like, I don't know. There are EU sources that I could pull, like in the Jedi Apprentice series. They established that like like Jedi initiates who are like too old to be trained, like either get sent home to their parents, or like if they're younglings who don't get made Padawan by a certain age, they get sent to like different like the agricultural corps or the medical corps, or like, you know, other like types of Jedi like philanthropy sort of branches, like and they do work that way, like as Jedi, but like not Jedi that are trained in any kind of way other than like in specific fields that they're going into. I don't know. The films themselves though don't really explain it, so I can't give you a better answer than that.
Yeah, from this is one of those things where unfortunately Ahsoka is now going fucking Ahsoka. It always comes back to bite us. This is something that Ahsoka's made a problem because previously, and I think this show even kind of says that, right? Of like, oh, if you're not trained, eventually your gifts just fade. Like children can be precocious with the Force, but as they grow older, if they don't have training, it doesn't really matter how powerful they are. It just kind of fades away, right? Like you need actual training to be able to use the Force. It's not just like you're born with loads of midichlorians, therefore you're super powerful, no matter what the sequel trilogy might have said. Like up until then, it was very firmly the case that, like, you know, had Anakin, say, been left on Tatooine and Qui-Gon had never found him, like he wouldn't have been able to use the Force. Like other than for
like very limited
quicker
ways,
reflexes.
Like quicker reflexes and like generally like being more perceptive than like your average person probably, but like that's only going to take him so far.
Yeah, I've also seen. Sorry, I just want to address this. I've seen someone in chat basically misinterpreting everything I've said to be like in the worst possible way. So I'm just going to be clear. I said the Jedi tolerated slavery on their borders, not in their borders. I am aware that Tatooine and Zygeria are not in the Republic. The point is that like the Republic is the only major player in this galaxy, and the Jedi are fully enmeshed in that system.
Well, are we going to pretend that the Phantom Menace itself wasn't kind of critiquing the fact that the Jedi sit out and like don't do anything about slavery when there are multiple lines from the slaves that Qui-Gon is interacting with going, hey, are you here to free us? And he's like, nope.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because that seems like a pretty good critique of that, of the Jedi not doing anything about slavery.
Yeah, I mean, my point in sort of singling out, I didn't name them, but that person in the chat is not to be like, ha, you're an idiot. It's to be like, can we all try and have a discussion in good faith, right? Where we're not trying to misinterpret each other to be the worst possible versions of what we're saying. Like, that's the whole point of this stream, right? Is to try and actually listen to what the other person's saying, not just in the kind of incredibly anal way of trying to misread every specific nuance of their words. But in actually trying to like understand the spirit of the argument that they're trying to present and dealing with that. Okay. We're all on the same page here. We're all friends. Good. Well, let's go.
Okay. And then one from Sam Montgomery for £2. Thank you for the super chat, Sam. The anti-woke are boring, so effing boring. Thank you. I was gonna read that out in Az's voice, but like I don't have the energy, so that's what you get.
Yeah.
They're so fucking boring.
Man, he had a meltdown the other day about the pride flags being in
shops. He did. And then Jay absolutely schooled him, which was great.
Yep. It's a shit. Well, let's not get onto that because I'll start ranting.
Anyway, and one more that just came in from Sky Slasher for $9.99. Ruined is too strong a word for it. Since it just doubles down as part of Star Wars, that just doesn't work. Stop trying to explain Anakin's conception. It always sucks. Okay, so hang on. I'm trying to read this over again. Since it just doubles down on parts of Star Wars that just... Okay, so it doesn't ruin it because it already didn't really work. Is that what they're saying?
No, they're just saying that like the show doesn't do anything. Like it doesn't pull any new damage out of the bag. It just already confirms damage that's already been made. So like this show is not...
I'd say it definitely adds new damage to... Like
I think it does.
Jolly and I are both already critical of the Chosen One prophecy as a concept, as introduced by the prequels. But like, there's no reason to like make that hole any bigger, you know? Like if I have a stab wound, that doesn't mean you need to reach your hand through it and expand it.
Yeah, it's again, I've seen similar versions of this argument around the place as well, where they're like, oh, well, actually, this show hasn't actually done anything that wasn't introduced elsewhere first. And I'm like, first of all, yes, it has. But secondly, even if that was true, just because someone else, as you said, punctured a hole somewhere, that doesn't mean that if I then make it 15 times bigger, that somehow means that I'm not as bad or worse.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, so that's all the super chats we have. We can finally move on to our next guest, a character named Jack with an Anakin profile picture. Hello, Jack.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. So, firstly, just thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. Big fan. And so, what I wanted to kind of start off with, just to preface, this may not be the best way to start, given that I'm supposed to be defending this, but I did not like this episode. I did not like it. And whenever I first watched it, I had a very similar reaction to what I would imagine most people who are watching this had, which, crying over the corpse of what was once Star Wars. But what I wanted to go back and just kind of give it the best faith that I could. And while I still don't particularly like it, I don't necessarily think that it breaks canon yet, per se. I definitely think they could going down the line. But I'm kind of like, I would hold off on saying just yet that it breaks canon. So what I kind of want to just establish first, just to cover all bases, are we in agreement that this episode is very strongly implying that May and Osha are a dyad in the Force?
It seems to be that way, yes.
I would say yes. I think that is what they're going for.
Yeah, I did something
an artificial dyad, like the leaks said, or like a true dyad in some way.
Yeah, I did something terrible in preparation for this stream. I went back and I watched The Rise of Skywalker, and what Palpatine.
Why would you do that to yourself?
I know it was terrible. But something very interesting that I picked up on was throughout, like, of course, this episode, there's the whole power of one, power of two, power of many repeated throughout the episode. And then in the marketing, the power of two specifically is very heavily associated with May and Osha. And whenever Sidious discovers that Rey and Ben are a dyad, he specifically says, the power of two restores the one true emperor. So I think that for me is enough confirmation to say that they are most likely a dyad.
Yeah, I remember that line. He also says unseen for generations, which I had always
it's been 6 generations, Palpatine. Come on.
Well, it's been generations. It was before he was born, so that was a long time ago.
Yeah, technically that would be true. That'd be true if it was like a dyad happened in his father's lifetime. And they're like, oh, not for a generation has this been seen. Like, yeah, 1 generation. Your dad. What the fuck?
Did you know Plagueis and Tenebrous were actually a dyad? It counts. Don't worry. But yeah, so May and Osha probably a dyad. So that's like when I kind of start off here, and you kind of did already cover this in the lead up to this, but what I just want to kind of go over is like, I would say like there definitely are issues created with like the concept of Night Sisters, well not Night Sisters, but like witches in general being able to create life. My argument would be to that, of course, that Anakin was made by the midichlorians. Like there was, of course, that Darth Vader comic recently. Not recently, it was a few years back that got people thinking, are they trying to canonize Palpatine made Anakin? And then the writers, of course, came out and said, no, that was not the intention. Palpatine did not make Anakin.
I mentioned that to Jolly. I mentioned that to Jolly yesterday because I know what you're talking about. The author Charles Soule backtracked on that, even though that was very clearly what that panel was implying.
He's literally holding his hands around Shmi's womb. Like it could not be more obvious.
I think the reason he retconned it was because Rise of Skywalker was coming out, and he was like, "Oh, that would make Rey and Kylo related."
And one of the things about that as well, I'll try not to sidetrack too much, but he said specifically, "Oh, the dark side isn't a reliable narrator," and in that very vision, there is a scene where Anakin looks and he sees the confrontation between Vader and Ahsoka on Malachor. It's like, okay, if the dark side isn't the reliable narrator, why is it just showing Anakin the future? But anyways, that's sidetracking. So yeah, I would say there is a difference between, of course, the chosen one being conceived via the midichlorians, which is, as far as we can tell, the canon explanation for how Anakin was born, and someone using the Force to create life. However, I would say that doesn't really necessarily matter. What matters more is how the Jedi perceive this. Because as of right now, the only information that they have, as provided by Anastasia, is, of course, they have no father, which, the lines are very much like echoing. Like you said, the whole stuff with Shmi and Qui-Gon, it's all meant to make you think of the Phantom Menace. So as of right now, the Jedi, I would say, are definitely in a position to think that these girls are connected to the Chosen One prophecy in some way. However, what I would kind of go back to is I haven't really seen people focusing on this very much. After that scene, you get kind of like a small council meeting between all the witches where they're discussing everything with May and Osha. and you get the whole thing. You get a back and forth between Carl and Anastasia of, oh, I carried them, I created them. But then after that, what Carl says is, and what happens when the Jedi find out how you created them? And that's very interesting to me because this whole episode has been, in my opinion, this is one of my critiques about the episode in general. I don't think it's very good, but it was very unsubtle about the fact that there is definitely something more going on in terms of what happened on Brenda. Like the camera very conveniently cuts away every time something major happens. Like, for example, whenever May drops the book that's on fire, it immediately cuts away to Osha looking out towards this window. You hear it dropping, you hear the lamp cracking, but then you look back. May is nowhere to be seen. The fire is rising, and then of course later you hear the witches dying. You hear that massive crash, but it's all off screen. So something clearly happened.
There's a whole lot of stuff like that, right, in this episode. So earlier on in the episode, when they're first talking about having a meeting about the girls, I think it's during the scene where they're trying to teach them how to use the Force, even though they then say like you don't use the Force as a power, which is kind of funny. Coral hears a noise or senses something, and she like runs into the generator room and looks, and we get this shot of an empty generator room, which I think is implying that Indara or Torben or someone was there spying on them and like retconning how to make that room go boom. Which is what happens later. There's also like at the end of the episode, when Osha wakes up in the ship, the Indara and Torben are in the background, but they're blurry. But if you're looking at Torben, you can see he's now got his scar, and Kelnaka is nowhere to be seen. So, and
as well, you can see in the trailer specifically, just in case, he attacks, and you can attacks.
What's probably happening there? My theory would be that the witches, I guess, have taken over his mind or something. That's what they're gonna do. They're gonna sick the Wookiee Jedi on them.
For me, I think that's probably where they're going, and I have several issues with that. But I have seen some people state the argument that Kelnaka seems to be like, at least there seems to be kind of a split in the Jedi that we've seen so far. For example, I think it's pretty clear just from like Indara's general demeanor that she's a bit more dogmatic, bit more not necessarily by the book, but she seems to be like, especially like when you take into account what May said to her, she specifically says like, yes, you do. Whenever Indara says, oh, Jedi don't attack unarmed people, like Indara seems to be the instigator in whatever conflict happened between the Coven and the Jedi. And yeah, of course, Tommen, I know his name's Torben, but I'm going to call him Tommen because, I associate the actor. I never cared for his canon name, innocent or otherwise. But Tommen, Torben is like racked with grief over what happened, and he gets, of course, attacked by Kelnaka, and so that's already setting up kind of like a thing between them. But you have Kelnaka, you have that little moment of him. I think it's him interacting with Osha, or he seems to be fairly friendly with her. She seems to like him. I think he waves at her whenever she's coming out of the ship as well. I might be misremembering that. I've only seen the episode twice, so I can't be exactly sure. And then of course you have Sol. He was very nice to Osha and May, and he was incredibly distraught whenever he was trying to find Osha and May as the place was all burning down. So I think there could be an argument to be made there that they aren't introducing full-on mind control. It's just that Kelnaka is like so disgusted at whatever Torben and Indara are doing that he literally just like attacks them because he's like, no, what the fuck are you doing? This is disgusting.
Yeah. But, I think the thing with because obviously I think this is pretty self-evident, and I don't understand really why people are trying to use this as a defense then, oh, there's missing context, like we're gonna get more information. I'm like, yeah, I know, like I'm not a child, I understand. the problem, I think, we kind of said this at the beginning, right, is like that what we have been given concretely, unless they're going to pull that this entire episode was a dream and a lie, in which case, thanks for wasting that time for an episode.
Yeah, fuck you in that case.
It all happened in the world between worlds.
No, God. But yeah, presuming, that at least some of what we have seen on screen actually happened, what they have introduced already, like, I don't think they could add any context that would stop it from being damaged. Like, however they wanted to interpret it would make it a problem. Like, the big one is, like, just what the Jedi know and what the Jedi don't know, right, in terms of the Council. Osha being the chosen, like the chosen one thing should be a thing now, because they have explicitly told the Jedi. I don't know why, by the way, the witches volunteered this information.
Yeah, that was the one that I took down on my rewatch. Was like, why did you tell them that?
Yeah, it's weird.
Like, it is that meme of like, why did you choose to tell him that? But yeah, when they're like, they were born of no father and they're really powerful, and you're like, well, so then the Jedi should just think this is a chosen one thing then, because that is literally the only criteria for the chosen one prophecy.
Unless we're retconning it that like the canonically the prophecy is only like 50 years old by the time Qui-Gon talks about it.
Disney,
no, wait, that's gonna happen, isn't it?
Well, I mean, like, I hope not, because like I say this like they pay any attention to their own book canon, but like it's Disney book canon or comic canon that the prophecy is like 1,000 years old.
Yeah, that doesn't matter. It's books.
Yeah,
books are. They used that page that was established on to wipe their own ass, and then started writing the Acolyte.
Disney and Filoni they're like May at this episode where they just take the book and they just start burning it.
Oh god! I mean, the thing is as well, like whether or not the Jedi seriously, but forget what the Jedi know or don't know, because that's already a problem. They can't really get around it. I still would make the case that even if this is like an artificial dyad or an artificial chosen one scenario, and that these aren't like the the definite article chosen ones, that this still damages Anakin, or at least at the very least lays the foundation for further damage to be done to him, because there is now nothing to stop Disney being like, well, maybe Anakin wasn't the chosen one, maybe he was just a potential person as well. Which, I mean, let's be honest, he can't really be, because Rey's actually the one who fulfilled the prophecy by killing the Sith.
I think what if the leaks were to be believed, I think what the idea they were going for was like May and Osha are legitimately the chosen ones, and then Anakin is also a chosen one, and then Rey and Kylo, I guess, are all. Just,
the problem is, like, at that point, what does it even mean to be the chosen one, other than the fact that you're born of a virgin birth? Does it just literally mean virgin birth?
Which Rey and Kylo
Well, I guess you could be really mean and like I bet you could pull a Disney here and like, creatively reinterpret from a certain point of view Rey's parentage. Like, well, Rey's father was a clone, so not a real person. So technically,
like Cutler Quain's kids are also the chosen ones.
Yeah,
the two worms were born of no father.
Yeah, they reproduce asexually, so all the worms are chosen ones.
So Jack, you were approaching halfway to like the time limit you have. You have 30 minutes. So like, I guess I wanted to push this along a little bit. What position specifically are you trying to defend?
For me, it was more like it kind of is what you've addressed. The whole idea of like the difference between like someone being birthed via the midichlorians and someone being birthed via someone tampering with the Force, and like there are of course issues that arise from that. Of course, like taking away from Anakin's character and such. And I agree that it does take away from Anakin's character. That's kind of my whole issue with the dyad in general. It's like I take a lot of issue with the chosen one prophecy, but I take more issue with the dyad because there really isn't a point to the dyad. There like it just appears to be something that was like, oh yeah, 2 Force users just get to be powerful without a prophecy of sorts to like fulfill. There isn't really anything that they have to do. I suppose.
It's kind of worse than that, because the issue with the dyad and this whole like binary yin yang, really bad misreading of yin yang that they're trying to push, which again it seems to be in this episode as well, because all the witches have yin yang symbols on their foreheads. Is that it sets up the paradigm that the dark side is some co-equal and natural branch of the Force that needs to be balanced, literally balanced with the light side and be in equal size and power in order for the Force to be like a quote unquote whole or good. And that's just a fundamental misreading of the idea of the dark side that permeates throughout the original movies, and this can't possibly exist. Basically, like this is a fundamental misunderstanding of how the Force works, and constantly trying to push this as a narrative is not only very annoying, but it's also very damaging, because at that point, the only themes you can pull out of the entire story become really problematic. Like this, Sheev kind of mentioned it in his Phantom Menace video. He and I have been discussing it for months. The whole like, if the Force has a will and it's literally picking people and it's doing evil to balance itself, or making people do evil to balance itself, that creates some very problematic outcomes in terms of what the stories quote unquote mean.
Yeah, like you said, Balin is now the most tragic hero in all of Star Wars.
Yep.
Oh yeah, like he was a hero. I just couldn't see it.
But yeah, to kind of get back to like what I'm supposed to be doing, which is defending this plot point instead of just shitting on it. But I think for me, the kind of thing would be, I suppose I don't have like any issues with saying that this creates issues with Anakin's character, or that the concept of the dyad in general is just a bad decision. But the thing is, unfortunately, the dyad is a canon thing, so I don't necessarily think that introducing the dyad again would break canon. I think it's just like, I think there are certainly ways that you could do it that could be interesting, but I still don't think it's a good idea. But my main thing is more just with, like you said, with the whole like the Jedi essentially, with like, yeah, their perspective or what they know and what they don't know doesn't really matter. But I think for me it matters in the sense that I think like if they do essentially find out that they were created, like with what Carl says, what happens if they find out how you created them? What I am guessing, like this is kind of speculative on my part, but just based off outline, what I am imagining is probably going to happen in this episode, or the next few episodes, is that we're going to find out that they did realize that these girls weren't like created because of the Force literally intervening. They were created via the use of magic, and I think Indara specifically is going to kind of see that as like a perversion of the Force, like something, as like Anastasia says, unnatural. And I think that's going to be kind of what instigates this conflict between them. And I think that's also kind of tying into the fact that, as I think it was Yor said in the first episode, Indara specifically campaigned for Osha to be kicked from the Jedi Order. And I think, so for me, I think that would negate the Jedi thinking that, oh, May or Osha could be a chosen one. And to address the point that you guys already brought up, which was about, well, why wouldn't they just think that, Shmi could have been a witch, for example? Like, I agree, that is quite weird. But I do think there is a difference. Because
sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
No, of course. What we've seen with witches, and there are some exceptions to this, of course, like Merrin in the Fallen Order games. But what we have seen from the vast majority of witches in Star Wars is they all travel in covens. Like you have the coven, specifically in this episode. You have the Night Sisters on Dathomir. I haven't seen Tales of the Empire myself, but I believe there was another like sect of witches on Dathomir that like Morgan Elsbeth trained with or something. But like essentially they're always like in some kind of coven. Whereas with Shmi, she was not only living alone with her son on this backwater planet that rarely gets any attention unless you're in a Disney Plus show, but she was also living in slavery. So I think it is reasonable for them to kind of come to the conclusion just off the bat she was not a witch.
There's a few things to that. Well, hang on. Can I take this, Jolly?
Yeah, go for it.
There's a few things to that. First of all, it's not necessarily the case that they have to believe Shmi herself is a witch, just that she was impregnated by witches. But also, I don't even buy like that just because we see her alone and seemingly not with a witch coven, that means she must not be a witch. Because she would have been pregnant with Anakin before ever arriving on Tatooine, right? Because they weren't originally from there, right? They were sold to Gardulla when Anakin was 3.
Yeah.
So like there's no telling where they lived before being sold to Gardulla, and Anakin was already alive by then. So whatever immaculate conception that was done by witches could have happened before they ever arrived there to Tatooine. Now, why the witch Shmi would be on Tatooine is anyone's guess, but like that's not enough for the Jedi to be like, oh, she's definitely not a witch. Even if Qui-Gon believes she's not a witch, like the Jedi would be like, well, yeah, but even if Qui-Gon believes she's not a witch or that she wasn't impregnated by witches, the Jedi would be like, we don't know this person. You can vouch for her, sure, but like we have our own reservations and we just don't have enough information.
And of course, specifically, Qui-Gon would be biased towards the idea of Anakin being the chosen one, so he has a reason to think Shmi would be a witch.
Yeah, and they'd just be like, you have no like the whole he had no father, which you don't even know if that's even true, Qui-Gon, but even if it is, we also have precedent to know that like that doesn't actually necessarily mean anything. That doesn't mean that Anakin was conceived by the Force.
And also, the thing is, I don't think it's going to be as simple as like, oh, they found out, Indara found out they were made by witches, therefore witches are bad, therefore, no Osha in the order, please. I think it's going to be much more down to the fact that they think the witches use the dark side, and therefore the Osha and was created using the dark side, which I'll be honest, seems to be exactly what happened, given how Anastasia talks about.
Why did they decide to let them train as Jedi or Osha train? At least? Why did they take her in?
it also leads to a worry I have, which is a lot of people seem to be making the assumption that going forward they're going to be like, oh well, Plagueis or whoever learned how to make Anakin if that's what they did from these witches. I'm like, I actually think it might be the other way around. I think it's going to be the Sith maybe taught them how to do it, and that this is an experiment of the Sith.
For me,
May was set up from before they were even born to be potential apprentices,
and that's where that necessarily comes back into play, because I don't think it undermines Plagueis' achievements or lack thereof, rather, on its own. Necessarily. However, if you're telling me that the Sith are just like they just knew how to do that already, like before Plagueis was ever even born,
they're telling people that they exist, or even if they're not directly telling people they exist, that a powerful dark side user is wandering around teaching witches how to make people out of thin air. That's maybe something that I would investigate.
Why not just do it yourself?
Yeah, there's also that.
I think to an extent I agree that the Sith are kind of like involved in this. The difference for me would be I don't think that they would have been involved prior to the birth of May and Osha. What I think is happening is that I think the Sith, or maybe not the Sith, but specifically who is the Sith Master, probably the apprentice, who is also probably Khmer. I think he is trying to harness the power of the dyad, because there was a canon, but I think it was Secrets of the Sith, that heavily alluded to the fact that the Rule of Two was created so that the Sith could harness the power of the dyad. I think the direct quote.
Incredibly silly, but
I hate that. I hate that. Like if you're going to introduce the concept of the dyad, I understand wanting it to tie it into the Rule of Two. But the way that they laid it out in this book is like Palpatine, I think, literally says the Rule of Two is just a pale imitation of the doctrine of the dyad. And it's like, oh god. But I think that
just doesn't line up at all with Sith ideology, right? Because the whole point of the dyad is like, two beings as one, and this whole point of the Sith is like, no, a master to hold power, an apprentice to crave it, so that one will kill the other and become stronger.
Mm-hmm.
What I think is kind of going on is the. Sorry, my brain just kind of went dead there. I think I completely agree with you. It goes against Sith ideology, but I think that is probably what they're going for. I think there have been a lot of hints that the Sith are kind of out for Osha, in my opinion, not just May. Not I've the Force visions, like the May that Osha got in the first episode. I think that those weren't just like arbitrary Force visions. I think those are probably from the Sith Master. I think that creates a lot of issues, but still, like, oh well. And also, you have Khmer making he obviously knows from whenever Osha turns up and she's like, oh, I just wanted to thank you. He immediately clocks on that it isn't May, and then he's just like, oh, you look exactly like her. His demeanor is like really different. Like he obviously is aware of Osha to some extent. And then, of course, in the trailer, there is literally a shot of Osha meeting the Sith. So I
wonder something. If we're going with that interpretation, right? That like these visions that Osha's been having were implanted into her mind by the Sith. Do we just to kind of play this out, like, so Palpatine kind of did a similar thing with Anakin in Revenge of the Sith by like showing him visions of Padme dying in childbirth, which were very vague and kind of hard to make out like any details beyond she is screaming out in agony and she's crying and something's happening and she's going to die. But I wonder if like we're saying like Palpatine could have given him more vivid like detailed versions of these visions, but like he wanted them to be vague so that Anakin really didn't have anything else to latch onto other than she will die.
And not only that, but like apparently it doesn't even have to be a dream, because in episode 2, I think
she just sees her.
She sees May running about. Oh, it's just.
Yeah. Well, I guess she technically was unconscious for that, right? Like she was unconscious in the ship, so it's technically a dream.
Yeah, but we're talking about in episode 2.
Yeah, in episode 2.
When they're going to Torben's room, she sees little May running up the stairs, and she follows her.
Oh yeah, that's true. Also, if that's the Sith, why would the Sith do that? Like, do they want them to watch
I have no idea what it's kind of like what you've talked about in previous streams. It's like
maybe the Sith wanted her to get framed for Torben's murder, but then the Chad Yord decided to interfere and follow her.
It's kind of what you've talked about in the previous episodes. It's like I cannot comprehend what the Sith plan is, because even if they do want to harness the dyad, how much is this really worth risking? Because they're risking a lot.
They are, yeah. It's really bad.
This is kind of the problem with this whole episode. To bring it back to episode 3, this is the problem with the people arguing like, oh, wait for context, which is like, there's already the problem of the Jedi at this point should already know enough that the Phantom Menace is now basically impossible to happen the way it happens.
Yeah.
But the same is kind of true of the Sith, right? Of like, there is no outcome here where the Sith are involved in anything that's going on that doesn't make the Sith that doesn't damage the Sith profoundly as characters.
Absolutely.
In terms of their competence and what they're doing. At this point, I'm amazed that we even got to Palpatine to be able for him to do his plan.
He's just looking back at all of his like predecessors, and he's like, "How the fuck did you guys like keep fucking up this badly?"
To be fair,
it's a miracle that we're still here, guys.
I mean, to be fair, it's like that meme I sent to you, Sheaf, where I was like, because I don't think Palpatine wanted Maul to give the game away that early. Like 10 years is a long time for the Jedi to be hunting for you before you're ready. And so Maul kind of screwed the pooch there. And so I sent Sheev this joke of being like, Palpatine being like, oh yes, go after them, but like, maybe don't wear the black robes and maybe don't use the red lightsaber. And then he just goes like swinging for their heads, going, I'm a Sith. And Palpatine's like, oh, for fuck's sake. And then Palpatine's like, okay, next time round, I'll pick a more sensible apprentice who won't give the game away. Did you know there's a Sith Lord controlling the Republic? Oh, fuck you, Dooku.
But yeah, so just to not take up any time anymore, I think I've laid out my points, and I think you guys have both thoroughly convinced me. So thank you for having me on. I really do appreciate this. Very productive conversation. Thank you. So happy Pride Month, and I hope you all have a good day.
Happy Pride Month.
Yes, happy Pride Month.
Hell yeah. Have a good one.
Yeah. Cheers. Thank you.
Well, he seemed nice.
He seems like a lovely chap.
I'm going to kick him now.
Conversations. Thank you for your input. Get the fuck out.
Reset the timer and then go ahead and read off some super chats that have come in. One from Mech for $2. Have you guys talked about the fire yet? So yeah, this isn't like a breakdown of the episode. So like there are a lot of things that I have to say about the way I'm assuming you're referring to the fire in episode 3. And not the fire in space. Fire. Yeah. I have things to say, but again, like this is one of those things where I am going to try to wait for context. Hopefully episode 4 sheds a little more light. What's frustrating is that like this is an 8-episode series, right? And like one entire episode was devoted to flashbacks, and it didn't even tell us really anything. Really poor way to structure your story.
Or false. It's just
so
a bit of a,
you either need an entire extra episode of flashbacks, or you need to intersperse them throughout the rest of the show just to give like the necessary context to make sense of what the fuck any of that was. All right, and then one from Adam Maximum for $10. Thank you for the super chat. Everything how bad writing decisions in modern Star Wars are given to characters played by minorities. Maybe conspiratorial, but does Disney do this intentionally to dodge legit criticism, blaming racism, etc.? This is a thought that I'd actually had. Yeah. I don't even think it's like that they're intentionally like giving them bad writing. It's more just laziness. Like sometimes a character will be underdeveloped or just poorly written generally, and you'll be like, that's a bad character. And then they're relying on sort of reactionary, like left-wing fans going, oh, racist. And it's like, no, they're just bad. They're just not well written.
The way I'd phrase this is like, I don't think it's nearly as conspiratorial. I mean, this is the thing with all conspiracy theories, right? It's like most human beings, I hate to say it, are just not clever enough to do organized conspiracies with any kind of degree of success and have it remain secret. And like Disney CEOs are not the brightest bunch in the tool shed. I think what's happening is that like Disney are Disney CEO like Bob Iger and co are like, oh, art is supposed to be about things, maybe. So like, what's current, what's hip, what's fashionable, and then they look around and go, oh well, people are talking about Black Lives Matter or gay rights, so like let's shove some of that in our shows, and then what you actually get is a show whose representation is as hollow and empty and bad as the writing is hollow and empty and bad, and for the same reason, which is that it's being made by capitalists who don't really understand art and don't really understand philosophy either, and they're just trying to shove a product out as cheaply and as effectively as possible to turn over as much shareholder value in a quarterly profit stream as they possibly can. But then what happens is, like, because it's obviously shallow and obviously broken, and it's also coming with bad writing, you get the crowd of idiots on the right who look at it and see, don't understand that correlation is not causation, and go, oh, the writing is bad and there's bad gay people in there that are obviously and like stereotypically badly gay. Therefore, it's because of the agenda, the message, which is not true. And then the problem is that like all the creatives involved who then get bombarded with racist messages rightly start going, oh, there's racism in the fandom, and then the entire fandom gets sidetracked into a discussion about racism, and then Disney look at the resulting culture war and they're like, oh, this is generating lots of publicity for us, cool, we'll stroke that, we'll feed that fire.
Spacefire.
Yeah, the Spacefire. It's a similar thing.
But Jolly, had you considered that Admiral Holdo has purple hair?
Yes, that is true. I had not considered that Admiral Holdo has purple hair and
Checkmate,
how deeply important that is. Yes.
Wokehead.
Don't call me a liberal. I don't want to be offended like that. I'm a socialist. Thank you very much. But yeah, it's one of those things where like people will just go like, "Oh, it's the message," and I'm like, "Is it?
No, it's just bad
or
writing.
Is it just the fact that the message? Yeah, or is it just the fact that the message is as poorly done as the rest of the writing is? Because let's just run with that argument for a second, right? And be like, let's say that a Disney showrunner came in, like let's say who's the best writer around, like Mike. Actually, like let's take Mike Flanagan. Okay. Bly Manor is one of the best. I wasn't suggesting we kidnap him. Sorry, that came out weird. Let's just take him. Let's just grab him. But like Bly Manor is one of like the best shows, best written shows I've ever seen. It's phenomenally well constructed and put together. Agreed. It is very queer. There are lots of queer characters in that, being very overt.
The two main characters are like a lesbian couple.
Yeah, and the thing is like, if people want to be like, oh, he's pushing a gay agenda, it's like, no, he isn't. He's just having gay characters. But again, let's say that he was. Let's say Mike Flanagan deliberately wrote the queerest possible show he could because he wants to try and convince you that queer people are good and normal, which I don't know why that's a bad thing, but apparently people take an issue. And I'm like, okay, but all of writing ever is, well, all competent writing, all actual art is trying to convince you of something. That's what art is. It's a way of communicating. It's trying to teach you something or tell you something or talk to you about something. So whatever that thing is, when we when we evaluate it as a critic, we're just looking to see how effectively that communication was made, right? That's all. When we're talking about objective criticism, like to take a really extreme example, like if someone showed me like Nazi propaganda movies from the 30s and was like, are these quote unquote good movies? I'd be like, well, they said exactly what they were trying to say to the intended audience they were trying to say it to, and they did so very effectively. So yes, in terms of their construction as art, they were good movies. That does not mean they are morally good, or that you need to like them, or that everyone should praise them. These are not the same thing. And I'm getting kind of bored of having to tell people this. Like the same applies to gayness in media. Like gayness anywhere isn't intrinsically a problem because being gay is not a problem. Newsflash. It's always about how people.
Says you.
Yeah, it says me, the queer person. But like it's always down to who's talking about it, how they're talking about it, how well they did that job. That's the point.
Yeah. Anyway, that felt like a tangent, but I'm going to read off this last super chat and then we can get to the next guest. From Clone. He's a friend of mine. Hello, Clone, for 10 pounds. Spice Cream's bottom text. I hope I read that in the intended inflection there. Yes, I agree. That's another like silly thing that people are kind of making a bigger deal out of than I think needs to be made. Spice is obviously a drug, and so I guess the implication is that spice creams are made of the same drug, which I don't think that like spice exists outside of drugs, right? Like that's I don't think that spice is only a drug in Star Wars because obviously really spices exist.
It'd be really funny if OSHA offered me like some gingerbread and they're like, spice bread, drugs.
Yeah, like obviously other spices exist beyond whatever the drug spice is and its contents. I'm sure it's not drug desserts that you're giving to. Well, maybe it is because they're cults, but like maybe don't assume that. I don't know.
I don't know who this. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to call you out because it's fucking nonsense. Scott. No, being gay is not a problem biologically, and I would really appreciate it if you refrain from being homophobic in this chat, please. Maybe actually bother educating yourself on some basic biology, like maybe look into things like the evolution of altruism or any other trait that is not directly does not directly lead to heritability. There's plenty of things that are genetically passed down, not because they improve an individual's chance of providing offspring, but because they improve the collective chance of giving offspring. This is like pointing to a bee dying after it stings you and being like, oh, see, the sting is a problem for bees biologically. I was like, I don't know, man. They seem to be quite a successful species, actually.
Have you ever seen the Bee Movie?
Yes, I think he should have impregnated that woman. It would have made for a much funnier film.
I can never listen to Sugar Sugar without thinking of that sequence of them like having a picnic and he crashes into the cliffside. I love that movie. Anyway, welcome in Hago Damask II. It's an honor. to have my own Sith master on the stream.
Yeah, Hago Damask is a Sith. I just thought he was a banker. Oh my god!
I mean,
Hey, I'm glad to be after a couple people because I've been taking a number of notes and hope to add to a couple of things that have been stated earlier on. I know you folks touched on the whole thing with that Sidious moment with Shmi in the comic. She's already pregnant before he appears.
Well, I thought the implication was that he was like that was just a visual representation of like she is becoming pregnant right there. Maybe it's not that. Maybe it is.
The previous panel, she's already carrying. And then
okay, but then what does that imply? That like he knew of Anakin while Shmi was pregnant with her and was like trying to was corrupting him even as early as in the womb?
I really can't speak to that, but I'm just pointing out that it's quite clear from the comic that what the comic artist and writer were saying about we're not implying that he created Anakin, was there from the get-go. So anyway, that's off the side.
Yeah, I was about to say. I guess this is like it's it's interesting to talk about in a kind of abstract sense, but the status of EU or comics is really not a concern we need to think about when talking about the shows. But yeah, I agree with you. It's a confused mess. I don't know what Disney are doing.
From what I can tell, you said the biggest issue, the primary point of having the stream is to speak to the whole father not there creating through the force of the twins, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think right off the bat that I think it would, yes, there is the nod to Phantom Menace with that they have no father, but that is rather ambiguous. That doesn't necessarily mean anything to the Jedi, so it doesn't necessarily mean that they'd be like, okay, this has something to do with the Chosen One prophecy. They make no mention that I am aware of in regards to that dialogue-wise. Granted, we don't really see much of them throughout the episode, well, latter half until Soul pops up and rescues Osha.
Well, okay, yeah, but what we're saying
we have a problem in writing.
What my main position here is that like even if it is not actually an example of these characters are a chosen one or the chosen one or an artificial chosen one, what matters to me is like what the Jedi believe about this information, because like they have their own interpretation of this prophecy that they know about, and a child being born of no father is a big component of that like is used as evidence for this probably means that they are the chosen one.
Well, it's not just a evidence; it's the sole criteria. Because, like, you can I don't want to pull up Wikipedia, but like you can pull up what Disney considered to be the canon prophecy, and literally the only criteria for the chosen one being the chosen one is that they are born of no father.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't even specify how that happens.
I'd consider that an after the fact. Like, I don't care about like the specific wording of the prophecy. And again, I'm really trying to stay out of book canon because.
True. In which case, all we have to go on is the Phantom Menace, where just that piece of information is treated as like the thing that really grabs the council's attention. When Qui-Gon's like, he was possibly conceived by the midichlorians.
He says his cells have the highest count of midichlorians I've seen in a life form. It's possible he was conceived by midichlorians. So like, I think it's a double up of like the immaculate conception on top of the fact that he has more midichlorians than any other person that Qui-Gon has known about. Like means. Probably chosen one, or at least possibly if the chosen one is a thing.
But it's really the latter one that's the kicker, right? Because if he just turned up and was like, I found a really powerful dude, they'd be like, oh, you found a really powerful dude, cool.
Yeah, let's see him.
Well, I think it's a little bit more involved than simply there was no father. I carried him.
Okay, but then
I gave birth. I can't explain it. And then the whole line about I've encountered a virgins in the Force. Here, it's ambiguous. For all we know, there was a father, and they're simply not speaking to it. The Jedi don't have and again, they don't reference it at all throughout the episode.
No, they do. They do. So Indara asks Anasea, where is their father? And Anasea, again, I don't know why she tells them this, says there was no father, or there is no father.
They have no father. They have no father. Yeah. That doesn't necessarily mean anything, especially since, again, we don't see the Jedi have no father with that information.
Well, so are you saying that like a potential interpretation is that like from the perspective of the Jedi, is she saying, I mean, they had a father, but like he's not around, so we don't mention him?
That's entirely possible, given how vague the wording is. If we did not have,
but that's not an answer to the question that they asked.
What?
Well, I mean, like they asked who was the father, like. even if he's not in the picture and they don't like to speak of him. Like the actual question was who biologically like gave the sperm to create these beings that we see before us. Like, you know, personal anecdote here. My father left when I was like 2, maybe even younger than that. I don't know. But like if someone asked my mom, if someone asked my mom who was his father, she'd say my dad's name. You know, if she's being interrogated by the cops or something, if we were drawing a real world. And like, you know, she wouldn't just say there was no father. I carried him. I gave birth to him. I can't explain it.
Yeah, the important point here is like, you know, if someone says who is his father, you just want to evade that by being like, I don't know where his father is, and like, you know, bullshit, you know, because you don't want to answer the question. Then you would just be like, I don't know where his father is.
Well, it even goes back to like, why would you tell, especially if there actually was a father, why would you tell the Jedi there was no father when you would know that the Jedi would consider that, oh shit, so like chosen one, maybe, perhaps?
Yeah. If your entire goal is to get the Jedi to leave without, no, not at all. Like,
how do you know that?
Go ahead.
How do I know? Right. Sorry, go on.
Well, first of all, you're misquoting. The question was, where is their father? They have no father. There was no who is it or any of that. And then you mention why. I agree. I don't think it was the greatest idea for them to say what they did in regards to the father. I think they could have been a little bit more circumspect about it, hiding it. Again, though, this is an all-female group, and how would they know about the chosen one prophecy? How do we know that they know that? Because she just kind of went off about that. We don't want to mention something like that in that way, because then the Jedi might think, oh, chosen one.
Well, I mean, we have the benefit of knowing that the witches do know that the idea of an immaculate conception is something that like the Jedi would have a very keen interest in, because of the line later between her and the Zabrak witch about like, I carried her, I created her, but don't, you know, you don't want the Jedi to find out how that happened.
Yeah.
They may not know about the specific prophecy. I don't know what they know about like Jedi prophecies, but like they at least know that is not something the Jedi would want to know.
But regardless, it's still something that you don't want to like. So remember, the entire, even if you want to, like, the witches have no idea about the prophecy, which the episode later shows us is untrue. But if the goal of the witches is just to get the Jedi to leave, it's like, we want to make the kids seem as uninteresting and unappealing as possible. We want the Jedi just to go away. Don't drop cryptic hints about their parentage. Just be as, you know, as banal as you can be. If the
question was where is their father, you could just say, I don't know, he fucked off when they were 3 and we haven't seen him since. Like, that's the answer you give them.
From this episode, that the reason this coven is even here is that they were persecuted because they were considered to be dark side users.
Mm-hmm.
So you really, really want to just give like any explanation that is not going to be cryptic or mysterious or going to lead the Jedi to stick around to find out what's going on.
Yeah, like when you get told by a police officer to step out of your car, you don't then hastily reach into the window as if you're making to grab a gun, because that's a good way to get yourself shot down.
I still am not quite understanding what's the issue with the line, because as far as they're concerned, there is no father. And within an all-female cult like that has no relevance. So I don't know why it's an issue for them to simply state that they have no father, because for all practical purposes, they do not.
Okay, so I want you to try and put yourself in the... Well, hang on. So I want you to try and put yourself in the perspective of Anasaya. So like, head witch, who's like, I want the Jedi to go away. I want them to go. And like, what do I know that the Jedi definitely know about us? Well, they know we're an all-female coven of dark side users who were persecuted and run out of the Republic. Therefore, I do not want to give any impression, given that they're already very like interested in the fact that we're training children at all. I do not want to give them any impression that these children are special or unique, or that we're doing anything suspect. Therefore, when the Jedi go, who is their given that you guys are an all-female coven, where did these kids come from? Who's the dad? Maybe don't just be like, there is no father. Maybe just be like, oh yeah, it was some random dude I bumped into in a cafe. Just bullshit lie. Just be like, yeah, I bumped into a mech neck on Tandian 5 and we had a passionate night of sex. It's just fucking bullshit. Don't dangle them out there like a piece of bait.
I guess then we're just gonna have to disagree, because I really don't understand. again, I don't think it was the best way to convey that, but I don't think it's as problematic as you two do. But obviously, that's going to be what it is. I guess I can just add a couple of the notes I have for a couple other things. I related to that. I will be interesting if we ever specifically find out beyond the whole Coven is on Brendok, what exactly all 4 of those Jedi were doing there. And you, let's see. Sorry, I got a whole page of cluttered.
No worries. So hang on, actually, while you're looking for your notes, there's another thing in terms of like what the Jedi think the witches know about the Jedi, or what we could reasonably suspect the Jedi think the witches know about the Jedi. Given that these guys are a coven of powerful Force users, and given that the prophecy of the Chosen One seems to be a thing that is known about by basically every group of powerful Force users, like the Wills know it, the Jedi know it, the Sith know it. I'm pretty sure the Dathomiri Night Sisters know it. Like you would expect that the Jedi would expect them to know it as well. So,
well, even if they don't, like again, like if we're talking about this dialogue exchange from the perspective of the Jedi, like even if one of the Jedi interpreted her words of "there is no father" to being like to her basically meaning like, you know, obviously, of course, they were born of a father, but like that father's not around. Like you'd expect at least one of those Jedi to be like, there is no father, and also very powerful dark side users are telling me that there is no father. That might mean more, you know, especially because I know that the prophecy exists and that someone at some point, if the prophecy is true, is going to come along born of no father and restore balance to the Force. Like that's going to be something that's on the back of my mind. And when I hear those words, that's immediately what where my mind's going to go.
We also have a question which needs to be considered into this, which is like why the Jedi are even here, because as is very strongly implied / outright pointed out at various points in this episode, the Jedi are basically deliberately interfering on Brendok to keep an eye on this coven. Now, either they were here to check up on the coven themselves and didn't know there were children here, or they knew they were children here and wanted to take an interest. Now, if it's the latter, we've got questions about why these specific children and why they're taking such an interest at such an advanced age, especially because they're out of the Republic. That indicates that the Jedi know there's something very particularly special and unique about these children specifically. Mm-hmm. Or it's the former, in which case they came to check up on the all-female coven of isolated witches in exile and found they've magically had 2 children are here, the only 2 children. Where did these guys come from? How did they get here?
Was there a man here at some point that got one of the witches pregnant?
If so, who's he and who's this guy interacting with witches that we should probably be finding out and following?
Mm-hmm.
Assuming it is the latter, though, given the age of the children, that would seem to imply that the Jedi have not kept tabs as well as they should have on this group, or if they even have at all up to that point in time, though.
Aren't the witches in hiding, though? Like, how do they even know the witches were here unless they kept tabs on them to at least some extent? They just found them? They got an anonymous tip?
I really hope it's not that they just stumbled upon them, because mother of God, that would be a contrivance.
No. I would hope not either. No, I mean, in terms of knowing that there are kids there, knowing there are not, they might have a general idea, or like you say, a tip-off of where they've gone to, or, okay, there's kids about, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they knew all the way back to whenever they left, wherever they left, that they mentioned. We don't even know how far back that is, to be honest. Presumably, I would assume that it'd be before the kids were conceived and born, but we don't know that.
Well, we do, yeah. They say that we've been in exile and that eventually, like, you know, we wandered around the galaxy looking for a home and all this stuff, and then like the Force gave us a miracle, like implying that they were born after the exile. So
there's also again on that latter point. So let's say the Jedi. This is almost like an OSHA situation from the first episode, where it's like the Jedi seem to be having to occupy this incredibly sweet spot of surveillance, which is just enough to know where the witches are, but not enough to like have kept really close tabs on them as they probably should have. But let's just presume, let's be good faith and say that is what happened. The Jedi were doing a routine checkup on these guys and found they had 2 children who were about 8 years old. Now the question becomes, given that these children are already well over the age at which they could reasonably be tested, and given that they are outside of the Republic, why is Indara and Torben and co so insistent about taking these children? Like, what is it about these children that is so special that the Jedi are willing to make this kind of exception and potentially, if that's how later context pans out, murder the Coven to get hold of them? Like, this
right
comes
off the
back to the
bat,
whole exception having been made for Osha back in episode 1 thing. Like, there is something, like, the Jedi clearly knew there was something special and unique about these children before they got there.
Yeah, because the
Otherwise,
thing is
why
that,
would they
like,
try and recruit 8-year-olds?
even in actual Republic worlds, like when a Jedi would go to the parent of a Force sensitive child, like they still needed the consent of that parent to give the child over to them to take to the Jedi. And if the parent said no, they just couldn't do it. So like if they are breaching Republic law and going to like a planet that they don't have jurisdiction on to try to take these two overage girls away from this coven of dark side witches in order to train them as a Jedi, even though like there are all sorts of like reasons that that they should not be initiated into the order, there has to be a very specific reason that these two girls are important to the Jedi.
besides the fact that they were born into a force-using institution rather than just
Well, hang on.
random
So
person.
if that's the argument, then why don't the Jedi do this every time a Night Sister gives birth? How come the Jedi don't turn up and basically wipe out the Dathomiri Night Sisters?
Yeah, they
and
know
take their
what the
children?
Night Sisters are and where they live and what kind of like how they run the planet of Dathomir.
Well, the Night Sisters seem to be a larger institution for one.
What, large enough
and
to
their
take out the entire
relation-
Jedi Order?
No, I mean compared to this small sect that we encounter on Brendok.
Why does that matter?
Well,
If the
hang on,
Jedi have the power to do this,
let him explain.
There's a little bit of a difference between what you have on the planet, and for all we know, in time past, they have an agreement not to interfere with each other. But when it comes to a smaller, far-flung sect that, as you folks have alluded to, may be involved in something that we don't like, something that we want to keep tabs on, that are having children now, which is surprising to us, we have more of a chance to exert our will upon them. Plus, we're doing this outside of what the Republic has stated. We don't know exactly what that involves with Dathomir.
well, given that the Dathomiri witches were wiped out by Grievous and a couple of, a few hundred let's be really generous, a few thousand droids, I don't see any reason why, if the Jedi are so concerned about children being raised into dark side sects, that they are willing to wipe out said sect and kidnap the children over age, they wouldn't do the same thing to the Night Sisters, particularly given what we learn about the Night Sisters in the Clone Wars and how the Republic thinks about them. I just don't see why the entire Order wouldn't be brought to bear on them, or even how it could be very easy for the Jedi just to go to the Republic, given that the Dathomiri's are in Republic space, and be like, well, there is a law that says we get all these children, and they're flouting it, and they're Darksiders, and you guys
also,
remember the Sith Wars.
Yeah, you don't want the Sith to come back, so you don't want any dark side factions to exist, and we can stop that from happening.
Like, again, we're having to, in order to make this kind of weird gray area, in order for Brendok to get this unique special treatment, we're having to basically occupy a very precise and self-contradicting sweet spot of evil, where the Jedi are like ruthless and power hungry and nasty enough to like do these underhanded, violent, murderous tactics against Brendok, but for some reason don't against other groups that are, potentially even more of a threat
worse.
and objectively worse.
Yeah, it's how like the Night Sisters are obviously a lot worse, and as you pointed out, much more powerful and numerous than these witches that we see here. So, if either is really a threat, maybe deal with the Night Sisters first.
Yeah, and if this is all about power and who gets the... Well, because actually, doesn't Anasai even say that, right? Anasai says, this isn't about good or bad, it's about power and who gets to wield it. It's like, well, if that's the case, then surely the Night Sisters would be first on the chopping block as the biggest rival organization of Force users, now that the Sith are gone.
I'll grant you that. However, your whole point in regards to the whole Force side of things with the two children being conceived, which I myself don't necessarily hold to as far as what the Jedi were doing getting involved, would that not seem to be, based off of what you stated, more of a threat, more of a point of interest than, okay, this is an established quantity that we know. They keep to their planet. They do their own stuff. We're not going to get involved with them. But the smaller outside group that we can quite easily send in a small group of Jedi to deal with them, and by the end of the episode, they're all dead except for the two kids.
Right, but again, that just comes back to the point we were making, which is in that case, that we are having to admit here that the Jedi know there is something very special about these children that warrants this action. That they think the children are this dangerous.
The witches are no threat because like they're so small in number. Oh no, they added 2 more to their rankings. Oh fuck, now we're in trouble. Like unless these children are very, very significantly powerful, I don't see why that warrants let's burn their fucking fortress down and kill them all.
Well, assuming that they did that, but
assuming that they did that, sure.
Yeah, true. Assuming they did that.
I'm speaking though in terms of if you have a smaller outside group that you can quite easily impose your will on, and you feel the need to do so or decide to, you can do that. It's a little bit different when you have a larger, well-established entity that you've dealt with presumably multiple times before in the past, and they do their thing and you do their thing, and as long as they keep to their quarter, it doesn't really matter to you what goes on. And again, we don't know exactly what the Republic's involvement in this is.
But now we're treating it like the Jedi are some kind of like almost like a mafia group, like imposing like some kind of intrinsically cowardly group is my point, right? Rather than a ruthless and powerful order bent on shoring up their political hegemony over this aspect of the creation, right? The Force. If they are these powerful manipulators who are very confident in their strength and are basically just slamming down challengers, then your biggest rival is the first one to go because you want to establish that you are you don't want a rival. You don't even allow time for the nearest person to become a rival. You deal with them first. They're the competition. Get rid of them. Brendok is no threat. You can deal with them at your leisure. Night Sisters have to go, right? But so in order for this, to be like, oh well, they'd go for Brendok first because Brendok's a weaker target. You're like, really? The Jedi don't think they can take the Night Sisters? Like 10/20,000, okay, so the High Republic's got more Jedi, right? Like 20,000 trains Jedi Knights.
Do we know that?
Well, okay, let's just say
the High Republic.
Let's just say prequel numbers, right? Let's just even then, like 10,000 trains Jedi can't take on the Night Sisters. I don't believe you. Like that should be a cakewalk.
Well, I never stated that they couldn't take them. My issue is that, again, it's a little bit different when you can, on the fringes of the galaxy, in the Outer Rim, you have a small planet with a group that has run there to hide, and we don't know exactly what their history with the Jedi is because we don't know exactly what led to their exile, and they can deal with them. With the Dathomiri witches, they're on a planet by themselves. They presumably have had dealings with them before, and we don't know the Republic's involvement in this. It'd be much easier for the Jedi to, okay, we're going to spot out, 4 Jedi out to this unknown planet that's not even within Republic boundaries.
Again, you're saying the word easy here, and that's kind of my point. It's like, what about the Jedi leads you to think that they're going to just go, the Night Sisters are a bit too hard for now. We'll do the easy option.
I didn't say that they were too hard. It's that how do we know that they have an overwhelming interest in doing so?
But because we're not the ones making that argument. You're the ones making the argument that the reason they've gone after Brendok might not might not be nothing to do with the kids, and just because Brendok is a coven of witches. And we're like, well, if that's the case, if they're just slamming down potential challengers or rivals in the Force, why are they tolerating the Night Sisters? Why are they tolerating the Wills? Why are they tolerating the Order of Jeddah? Which would be much bigger and closer to home threats.
As far as your last two, because their history is benevolent, and as I said, in regards to the Night Sisters, we have no indication that they had any profound influence outside their own borders.
But again, you've provided a contradiction to your own argument in that thing. You're like, well, the last two are good. Like the Night Sisters are worse. The Night Sisters are worse than the Brendok, like by quite a long way. So if it's a matter of morality, then again, Night Sisters should be top of the block.
And we all know that the Jedi did that with everything that they encountered. They do operate within the Republic as a sort of paramilitary organization when it comes to stuff like this. They don't deal with the Hutts. Why don't they deal with the Night Sisters?
Well, because the Night Sisters are in Republic space, A, but also B, why wouldn't you then deal with the Night Sisters? Particularly because, again, the argument here is about political hegemony over the Force, not just slamming down the Republic's threats. Like, the Jedi don't get involved in the Hutts because they have no reason to themselves, and because the Republic are happy to tolerate the Hutts. But this is about whether or not the Jedi are willing to tolerate other Force-wielding groups.
Well, we know that they do.
Well, then why are they going after Brendok if not for the children, then?
As I said, I can't really speak. I don't know what their history is with them. And I didn't say that it had nothing to do with the children. My whole point was that I think you're reading too much into the whole they have no father and what the Jedi were actually aware of as far as the children themselves. I can't speak to knowing how powerful they are or not. But that was all in regards to this whole dyad issue and so on.
Well, no, but hang on, to bring this all back to the beginning, because the point we made with like the targeting of Brendok by these Jedi is like, why would they go after Brendok if not for the children? And then we laid out all the kind of reasonings around that, and like, you know, because it's highly unusual behavior, even for a kind of corrupt Jedi Order, right? Like they barged into a planet they got no jurisdiction over to try and take 8-year-olds who they've got no business training even by their own rules. And let's not forget when Anakin, who Qui-Gon, a Jedi Master, was like, I think this is the chosen one. The Council were like, I don't know, man, he's too old.
Yep.
So like a serious exception was made to try and grab these 2 8-year-old girls. Why? What did they know about them that would have led them to conclude that that was something they were willing to do? Right? Why not just let them be? If Brendok is no threat, if this coven is no threat, if they're out in the middle of nowhere, why bother taking these girls or trying to take these girls? Why not just leave them to it?
I as I said, I can't speak to that. I don't have an issue with the idea that they went over and did that. I don't know why they did that exactly.
But then we have something that's out. Okay, but then if there's no, I guess the main thing here, right, is like, this is not something we can just be like, I don't need an explanation for. No, we do need an explanation for this behavior, because this is wildly not out of character, but like a very extreme version of the worst of the character of the Jedi we've ever seen. Like, this is a very extreme behavior. It demands, and given that the entire premise of the show is a mystery show, that we're setting up a mystery here, providing an answer to that mystery is absolutely crucial. Like, if not in this episode, then going forward. But like, certainly that is an answer we're going to need. Why these girls? Why target Brendok if not for the girls? What's going on? Like,
No,
we
I
absolutely
agree.
need those answers. It's not enough to be like, I don't care why they were there.
No, I do have an interest in finding out. I think it's a bit early to jump to conclusions on that, especially off of a line that is rather ambiguous, at least to me.
Well, this is why we keep saying, like, people keep saying, you know, wait for context, and it's like, the issue that we have is that I don't think there is any context that the show could give that explains away all these things without just opening, you know, more questions and cans of worms and things like that, like making things worse rather than making it better.
Sure.
You can call me a cynic for that, but like, you know, history has taught me not to have too much faith in Disney Star Wars, but also like, it's just one of those things where there's so many questions to answer that like I don't think you can without contradicting yourself somewhere. And I will be amazed if the show proves me wrong.
And
no, I would agree.
I mean, and again, like, that's kind of what we've just been doing, right? Like, you and I, like, we've been sitting here going over like the various like possible reasons the Jedi might have attacked Brendok, and basically we've been running through them one by one, going, okay, but that doesn't work, this doesn't work, and that's, you know, at the core of what Sheev and I are kind of talking about on the stream, right? It's like, this is a behavior, or this is a thing that has happened where no context that they could provide is going to improve the show. It's only going to damage it. Like, because if it's nothing to do with the girls, if the Jedi just attacked Brendok for reasons, then we've character damaged the Jedi Order quite badly. Like, regardless of the explanation that's provided, because if it's anything other than the girls, that's really bad. That the Jedi are apparently willing to do that. And if it is the girls, then we have the same. Then all the problems from before come back into place.
Well, as I said, that as far as if the girls are not part of the reason why, again, we don't know the history, and it didn't help that we did not have as much of the Jedi as I would have liked in that episode, and so we don't really have the greatest understanding of what their side of this is, and hopefully that will be resolved, as we've said. And as far as if there are the girls, I don't necessarily see an issue with it being the girls if they learned of it, and for whatever reason it has to do with even the fact that they're an all-female group. And what's this all about? Whispers of them having children, and we go to investigate, and we find that we have an interest in the kids, and so we insist on them being tested. My point in coming on this here was...
Sorry, go ahead. No, after you.
The biggest reason I came on here was specifically in regards to the point about the birth, the Force, the chosen one, the dyad. They have no father. So it is nice to go along this route in regards to the rest of it, but I don't think I think I stand where I stand, at least on that side of things. And to different people are going to look at a line a little bit differently. And I still do maintain that a big part of it is if we didn't have this whole chosen one nonsense, which is what it is, we'd be in less of a position to interpret it the way we are or are not.
I mean, I can definitely agree with you, though. I think the entire chosen one concept was a bad one. I don't think that's on anything except damage to Star Wars. Unfortunately, like you say, we're kind of stuck with it. Thanks, George. And so, like, we kind of have to play within that. But yeah.
Sorry to say this, but we have officially run out of time. We're trying to give every guest 30 minutes, and we have just exceeded that.
Sounds good. Good chat.
Yeah, thanks for
thanks for coming on, man.
Hang on a second. So yeah, oops. Reset.
Oops.
Yeah, there I am with my phone being all klutzy and blah, blah, blah. I'm all over the place right now. Sorry, give me a sec.
Oh, Sheev. You
I have
silly Billy.
a few super chats to go through, and then we can move on to our next guest. Hey, Grappy. I still don't know what the symbol is. I really should learn what it is, but it's 40-something. Dune 2 or Oppenheimer? Dune 2.
I would say Dune 2 as well, yeah.
They're so good. They're both so fucking good. But yeah, Dune 2. Another one from Clone for 10 pounds. Thank you for the super chat. Andrew says Splungus. C says Ooga Booga. Yeah, they're in C's VC right now. C was trying to come on, but I was like, dude, I DM'd him and I was like, do you have like any actual disagreement, or because we can't let you on otherwise? And he was like, I just wanted to come on and say hi and then say something racist. So I told him he can't come on. But yeah, hey C, hey Andrew. And one more. From Kawibo for $9.99. Thank you for the super chat. If you can actually intentionally give birth to Force-sensitive children using the dark side, it utterly invalidates everything Disney has been doing since The Rise of Skywalker and his world-breaking lore, period.
I mean, I agree. I'd be interested. Like, so here's the thing. Like, I agree, but probably not for the reasons that maybe this commenter would. Like, I think it's more of an issue in terms of like Palpatine's quest for an apprentice. Like, okay, once you're 10 years into Vader clearly not getting over Padme and being a broken apprentice and never fulfilling his potential, and you know how to make, like, you know how to just like create powerful dark side users. Maybe just do that.
Like,
then
forego the whole like cloning process too, right? Like you're going out of your way to try to create clones that can carry the Force sensitive gene, but like, why not just create a chosen one body, and then transfer your soul into that?
I guess it has to be your own DNA, or the soul transfer doesn't work. But then Rey isn't.
Says who?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Also, like Rey is only half his DNA. Is that close enough?
Well, then impregnate someone that you're like related to. Like seriously, like have like.
But also, like, you can make female Boba Fett's. Can you not make female Anakins and impregnate one of those? Like, he's got loads of midichlorians.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I do agree. I guess I'd love to have him like come on here and he could like elaborate on exactly what he means, but although we do seem to be generally in agreement, so whatever. All right, and then our next guest is Dead Snark. Hello, Dead Snark.
Oh, hello there. So, yeah, very honored to be here. I guess I'm a bit grateful to be going a bit later since it seems a lot of my talking points were covered earlier. So I guess, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, no, you were saying?
I guess the main thing which I think I'd like to debate, or at least attempt to defend, which hasn't been stated yet, is the idea that this episode warps the canon because of how people in the future would react to it. Like, how would Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan react to finding Anakin if, like, 100 years ago, there were these two twins who may have been suspected to be the chosen one, whether or not they turned out to be or not, etc. But I think that I'd like to put forward the case that perhaps there are reasons why this era in history or the sequence of events in the Acolyte would not be remembered going forward, or at least not to the extent that it would affect the perception in future eras.
Okay.
So I think the first thing I'd like to talk about, it being talked about before, is the strength of May and Osha, because I think that generally there's been a perception, or at least a line of thought, that they must have superpowers as Force users or be super strong. And I don't think that the show has actually advanced that so far. I think maybe you could argue it's been implied by how people treat them, but what we've seen in the show, it doesn't feel that way. I mean, we saw 2 episodes of May trying to assassinate people. In one, she won through misdirection, and then the other, she only won because the guy offed himself, and she was subsequently beaten by Saul and won only through, and escaped only because of Osha sparing her at the end. And in terms of Osha, so far what we've seen from her is failing to pick up her own droid from a short distance away and having a vision. In comparison to that, Anakin at a fairly young age was like building his own droids, winning a pod race, blowing up the droid command center, etc., etc. And both the midichlorian test and the Jedi Council judged him to be very strong in the Force, which was one of the criteria which judged him to be the chosen one, being the virgin birth and also being extremely strong in the Force.
I don't know. I see what you're getting at, but I don't know how much we can conclude about May's power levels or Osha's power levels from what we've seen in the show, purely because in Osha's case, she seems to have had struggled in the Jedi Order because of her own traumas, in the way that sort of Vader struggled because of his later on, and left because she wasn't having a good time.
And she seems to have cut herself off from the Force too.
Yeah, and it's been 6 years. The other, I mean, she was powerful enough that they reasonably suspect that she could have assassinated a Jedi Master. So that tells us something. The other thing is, in terms of May's power levels, we don't know how long May's been trained for. Like May have only been found by the Sith like a year ago. I mean, there are other problems with that, like why the Sith would allow an untrained acolyte who could potentially like really mess everything up to go running around knowing Sith philosophy and so on. But like that's a kind of separate issue.
Well, I would also argue as well that like when we're comparing to Anakin, like, you know, Force potential is one thing, but training and experience is also going to factor in heavily. Like, I can't imagine like Attack of the Clones Anakin beating a fully trained Jedi Master in a one-on-one. Maybe Revenge. I mean, sure, Revenge of the Sith Anakin probably, and he is a little closer in age to May and Osha, but like he also has been training since he was 9, and we know for a fact that Osha has been in a war, yeah. And we know for a fact that Osha has not been training since she was around that same age, because she stopped 6 years ago, and we don't know how long May has been training.
Yeah, and as for the implication side of things, and like you're right insofar as like this is just implication so far on this side of things. Of course, we do have the line from Anasaya, who literally says like, "Oh, you're a very powerful girl," but maybe she just means relative to the others. Who knows? But it is worth pointing out that May being taken as a potential acolyte, you know, as a potential Sith, a Sith in waiting almost, would not have happened unless the Sith thought she was potentially powerful enough to be incredibly strong, given how the Sith recruit. That like they just wouldn't have countenanced her joining otherwise.
Actually, that does sort of lead into like one point I was going to talk about in relation to the twins, because one thing that did strike me as odd in the episode is that the Jedi seem very intent on taking Osha, but they show no interest in May. If they were so interested in these twins who could potentially both be chosen ones or at least special in some way, they basically send, like, May goes into the ship for like 5 minutes and they send her out again. Osha is the one who, as far as we can tell, gets the big speech about how you have to like say what you want and become a Jedi. It'll be really cool, as far as we can tell.
I'll push back on a couple of those points, because the Jedi are very clearly like also interested in May, because there's even a line where the witch says like you can take Osha and test her, and then Sol says both girls. Like very intent, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Insistently. Like he wants to test both of them. But also we don't know how long May was actually being tested for, because it kind of cuts. Could have been 5 minutes, could have been an hour. We don't know what was said to her by the Jedi either.
Yeah, there's also that as well. Like May is very much like Osha is willing to hear the Jedi out. Like she's uncertain / wants to go with them. May is very passionately like, I am not talking to you. You are bad. I'm gonna shut this shit down and get on my way. Yeah. So presumably she went into that ship and just wouldn't talk to them, basically, other than to like throw the test. so they probably gave up. Now, I don't mean give up overall. I mean gave up on that test because, again, for reasons unknown to God or man, Sol doesn't use the Force to catch her when she falls. But I presume that the Jedi were there to go capture both of them when they ran into the Coven place. They only took Osha. The only reason they only took Osha is because, as far as they saw, May fell down a bottomless pit and died.
Yeah, which I'm gonna love whatever explanation the show comes up with for how she survived that.
I like the idea that Darth Plagueis was there at the bottom with like a blow up bouncy castle, just like frantically pumping to get it up in time to save
like
her.
that scene in The Office where Michael is trying to jump off the roof of the building, and he has like a bouncy castle there and a trampoline, and he like every time he's about to jump off, he like has second thoughts because he's like, this is probably not a good idea, actually.
I guess it's like going back to Osha, but what we do know about Osha is that they trained her, but doesn't seem to have shown any particular potential, at least from what we've seen so far. She didn't really stand out, and they eventually let her go of their own volition, and Indara actually argued for her to be kicked out. Like, surely if they thought that Osha was special in some way, they would have tried to keep her or keep closer tabs.
I mean, there's a lot of reasons why Indara might have like advocated for Osha to not be to discontinue Osha's training. She may not even believe the Chosen One prophecy is real, or maybe she does, but she fears how powerful Osha's becoming. There's any number of reasons why.
Or maybe she thought Osha was the Chosen One at the time, but has since concluded that she isn't, and therefore it's just a danger. Like, there's any number of reasons. The other thing there is actually, never mind. I've kind of addressed that one already.
Yeah, that's where I was kind of go towards. It's like a Jesus hoax thing. Like, would you remember every single person who's ever claimed to be the second coming of Jesus? Like, if you had this special kid and you were training her for a few years, and then after training her for 6 or so years, it turns out that she isn't particularly special. There's nothing special at her midichlorian count. She's not strong in the Force, and she doesn't really want to be a Jedi after all. The archives record her as a potential Chosen One or just someone who flunked out.
Well, but wouldn't that make it worse for the Phantom Menace? Because at that point, Anakin turns up and Qui-Gon's like, I think he's the Chosen One. And they're like, yeah, but we had this exact thing 100 years ago.
There have been hoaxes, apparently. The thing is that, either you're saying there have been several, to quote the whole hoax Jesus thing, your analogy you're going for, either there have been several, misfired Chosen Ones that the Jedi have encountered over the years, in which case, the circumstances surrounding Anakin's birth, as Qui-Gon presents them, could all be a hoax as well, and the Jedi have no reason to take any of it seriously. Or Osha is the only one in thousands of years, within a century of the Phantom Menace, and in which case, I feel like the Jedi would probably remember that, especially since a lot of them were alive when she was inducted into the Order. I'm not going to know every single Jesus host, but if I existed 100 years ago and I met someone who shared a lot of the same parameters of oh, you might be Jesus, you might be the return of Jesus, and then I met someone today who fit a lot of those same parameters, I'd be like, oh, you're probably that person I met 100 years ago. You could be a hoax, or you might be the real deal. I don't know, but I'll at least acknowledge that person I met 100 years ago exists.
I mean, I think the show has always struggled with that sort of retroactive continuity. For example, I think with Ahsoka is a big example. We have to kind of ignore that she existed throughout the entire original trilogy, or that Anakin had an apprentice.
But that's bad.
Yeah, but that's a problem. That's the thing. Is because again, there's a line of argument which you almost touched on, about a minute ago, where people go, oh, but that's just how this is the case. Whatever you think about it, this actually happened in the canon, therefore it's fine. Or the very fact that it exists means that it's somehow we need to conjure an explanation for it rather than just the writing was bad, right? And that was kind of what let's say. The Jedi were absolutely convinced that Osha was the Chosen One. Let's say the next episode just outright confirms this, and Indara tried to get rid of her anyway. And people are like, see, that's a thing that can happen. I'd be like, no, but that's a problem. Why would she do that? That doesn't make any sense. No, the writing is bad there. That you can't, doesn't fit. Right? There's a tendency, and I completely understand it. There's a tendency of trying to make sense of bad material once it's already in there, rather than taking a step back and go yeah, I know they wrote that and I know they intended this, but it just doesn't fit. Right? It just doesn't work.
Yeah, I think that
Because, like,
that is kind.
imagine-
So go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Like, just to play that out, like, to the worst extreme. Like, imagine in the next episode, we get flashbacks to like Osha just before she left the Order, and like they present Indara as basically like worshipping her as God, and be like, "You must stay. I can't let you leave. I'll kill you," like your sister said. You know, like it was like that obsessive, and then they just cut back to the modern day, and they're like, "Yes, Indara argued passionately against you being in the Order." We wouldn't be like, "Oh, well, there's missing context." We're like, "No, that doesn't make any sense. Something is grossly wrong here because the two things we've been presented just don't mesh at all."
I think that I'm not really trying to argue that there's like a series of hoaxes. The sort of argument I was trying to do is that this could have been presented as such as a small or insignificant or misleading incident that people in the future wouldn't consider it as strongly when considering Anakin. And they did also test Anakin specifically in the Council to determine his strength in the Force, which could have been more persuasive than whatever Osha showed. I guess, like, I would say that.
Like, are you talking about the test they put him through, or the?
As I recall, I think that the council also tested him. No, after he was brought to Coruscant.
They did.
I guess the pushback here though is like whatever they found out about Osha was enough that they were willing to kidnap an 8-year-old girl who was well past the age of regular training. So like clearly there was something very promising there. And also like in the test we see of her, like they catch her out because she is so good at the test that when they lie to her about her getting answers right, she calls them out for it accidentally.
But the thing is that also
she passed
and like
flying colors.
And we have to take that into account as well. Like, again, let's not overlook the fact that the Jedi did allow her to train despite all the circumstances surrounding why they shouldn't have let her train. When you look at Anakin, who, if we are saying that is just objectively way more powerful than Osha or May, and meets the same criteria that would befit, like, this person might be the chosen one, there were still a lot of very skeptical Jedi who didn't want to train him and feared his training and the danger therein, and only conceded after Qui-Gon died. The Sith came back, and Obi-Wan said defiantly, "I will train him no matter what." It was very close. It was a very close call. But like here, we're being presented with almost like, oh, well, apparently, despite the fact that Osha has objectively more trauma than Anakin did, and all sorts of baggage that he also carried, they just let her in. Like, there has to be a reason for that, other, like, beyond just that she may have been immaculately conceived, if apparently that's not even enough on its own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do think that part of the conceit, that is part of the fundamental flaw and conceit of the show, is that somehow requires everyone in the future to not know about what happened, and then currently we're just trying to put pieces together to try and see how that fits. But I mean, the way that I'm at least trying to figure out at the moment is that we know for a fact that they were sent to Brendok, and like Soul says, he was posted there. He's spying on the kids from the beginning. I mean, I think at least the theory that I had was that perhaps they weren't sent necessarily to kidnap the kids from the beginning, but discovered them, they became interested in them, and then by the end of the episode, everyone who could say no to Osha joining the Order was dead, at which point parental consent wasn't an issue. So then I could see a way they could have just brought her back, said that, oh, we found this kid who's been trained in the ways of the Force, yada yada. There's no one who could say no, and it would be much more problematic to leave her running around with these dark side training in her head than to train her and make her part of the Jedi.
Well, the thing is, though, is again, so if they just happened to, this is almost like the last call, right? Like if they went to Brendok and they just happened to find out about the children by sheer accident, you still have the problem of like they have found people who are way past the age of training and have made an exception for them, regardless of the trauma and the baggage. There is a reason for that, because you say this like, oh well, they couldn't have just left them. Like, why not? Like, honestly, like, why couldn't Sol have just dropped her off at an orphanage? Or, like, I'm sure there's plenty of, like...
Like, we know for a fact that the Jedi will deny the training of a child around the same age as Osha. And, like, what do you think they were going to do with Anakin? Whatever it is they were going to do with Anakin that was not train him, they could have just done with Osha as well. Like, say they were going to put him in an orphanage, or they were going to put him, like, in the aforementioned, like, various corps that they send, like, essentially outcast Jedi to. Jedi who didn't make it, Jedi who weren't accepted or didn't get like a master in time. You know, like there are other places they would have put Anakin, so that it stands to reason there is a place they would have put Osha and May as well.
I was about to say, like, if Anakin didn't, if let's say the Jedi had said like no to Anakin, I imagine he probably would have ended up with Padme, right? Like, or her family. Like, she probably would have taken responsibility for him, given the attachment she had at that point.
Well, the thing is, like, yeah, I just don't imagine the Jedi. It's like you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here, sort of thing. Like, I don't care. I don't think they really care where he goes as long as he's not being trained as a Jedi.
Yeah, I guess the limit to that is like I don't expect the council to be like, no, we're not going to train you back to slavery, child. But they definitely would have been like, no, you're going somewhere else. Like, we're not taking responsibility for you because you're not a Jedi.
Yeah.
I guess, again, this is the sort of crux of it, right? Like, there's a catch-22 with Osha. It's just either she is not enough of a candidate to be the chosen one to be remembered by the council 100 years later as being anything worth talking about when Anakin's brought into the room. In which case, we then have a massive problem as to why they've carved out these huge exceptions for her. Like, if that's the case, or she is that powerful to merit those exceptions. In which case, why aren't they talking about her when Anakin is brought into the room?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you made a lot of strong points, and I think it all comes back to that issue of continuity, and somehow everyone forgetting about what happens in this show 100 years later. I don't know, maybe they're going to kill everyone off and it'll become a moot point. But
Vanessa knows now, and she's told the council already.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't see how we can square that away, really. Because again, there are Jedi who existed in the Phantom Menace who were alive at this point, so this is within living memory for them. I saw someone in chat say something about how, like, whatever happens in the show might have caused them to just erase Osha from their records. Even if we're going with that, it's like, yeah, but Yoda, Yarael Booth,
Yaddle, Yarel Booth, Oppo Radcesis.
Yeah, they know about Osha because they were there.
Yeah, like four actual members of the High Council were High Council members when May was admitted to the Order.
If the show was set like 1,000 years ago, or even just 900 years ago, so like maybe it's post the Sith's supposed extinction, but like Yoda maybe isn't there yet or is too young to remember this as a thing to have happened, then maybe we have something to work with. But like we can't say that now because it's only 100 years, and people don't seem to realize how short of a time span 100 years actually is. It's not very long.
Yeah, I mean, what D-Day, literally, like, we just marked the 80th anniversary of D-Day. That was 80 years ago. It's like very nearly, like, World War I is over a century ago now. Mm-hmm. No one is in danger of forgetting it.
I mean, there are historical events that happened thousands of years ago that we remember because they're significant.
God, you're never going to let that drop that time I killed all those children in Mycenaean Greece, are you? You always have to bring it up.
My cousin was there, you fucking asshole.
He deserved what he got, the little scrub.
Oh.
I guess my counter to that was going to be that there are also a lot of very recent historical events which people tend to overlook and misinterpret, but that does not really address the fact that Yoda would probably remember, as would Yaddle.
Well, I guess to draw the
wherever the fuck Yoda is, right?
Oh yeah, true. Wherever Yoda's having a beach cruise somewhere, he's doing all right. But like, just to take the the most direct example we can, which is like, I don't know, like the Mormon faith, which is like about 200 years old. Like, someone turned up basically being like, I am, if not the Messiah, then basically the prophet, the next big prophet, and was immediately then stoned to death in a failed presidential campaign, which is kind of hilarious. But like, if then in the year 2024, someone came along being like, I am now the Messiah, God has spoken to me, and I've got these gold tablets that you can read with spectacles of stone, were given to me by the angel Moroni. We wouldn't be like, oh yes, you're the Messiah. We'd be like, the last time this happened, that guy was a fake, actually. Like, I know loads of people believed him at the time, but Also, apologies if anyone who's in the chat who's a Mormon, because yes, I did just imply that Joseph Smith was a con man, but unfortunately, the historical record agrees with me. So what can you do?
Yeah, I think there's definitely you definitely raised a lot of strong points and definitely addressed a lot of things that I was thinking of. I think at least the only way that I can very square it in my mind is if they somehow were able to either erase, cover up, or downplay what occurred. But I think you also raised a lot of strong points for why that would either make the Jedi seem out of character or wouldn't make a lot of sense for the people who would feasibly have been there at the time.
Yeah, what I will say, and I hope, again, excuse my accent, because it makes everything I say like sound about 1,000 times more patronizing than I intend it to be. So please take this as genuinely as I do mean it. It is genuinely a really good thing that like everyone we bring on seems to be trying to think of good reasons for why things can happen, right? Like it's a good thing that people watch these shows and try and, you know, reason with them and try and make them fit and try and think out all the possibilities and try and approach them in the best possible faith. I think that's, you know, I want to applaud you for doing that, because that's a very laudable thing that people should do when we engage with media, to, you know, actually engage with it. The other thing I'll say is, you know, and I think you've done that now towards the end of the stream as well, like part of that is knowing when to just accept that someone's messed up. Like, you know, like it's when we see a contradiction that like doesn't really have a good answer either way, it is fine to just be like, yeah, no, that doesn't actually make a lot of sense, and the writer maybe could have done a better job with that. You know, maybe should have redrafted or something. And also, like that, you know, just because something is poorly written does not mean that I'm telling people that they can't enjoy it. Like, you know, I don't know how you felt about The Acolyte in terms of just purely on a subjective level, but lots of people I know who watched it and thought it was bad absolutely loved the shit out of it. And like, there's plenty of bad media that I love the shit out of, like Battleship, which is one of the funniest films I've ever seen. You're allowed to like what you like, basically, and it's good to bring on people who are prepared to have a conversation about the construction of art without getting super defensive about, like, you know, what it means to them personally. So yeah, and that's a very long-winded way of me saying like thanks for being such a decent sport, basically.
No, I mean, I think this has definitely given me a lot to think about, and it's very hard to find anywhere to discuss this show on the internet which isn't saying it's bad or it's good with no further context. So I think that the way you've presented your points has helped you to analyze the weak points and like plot holes, basically.
Well, I'm glad we could help then. That's genuinely really like nice to hear. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
All right.
Okay.
I like it when we have pleasant people on. It's really nice to be reminded that there are people who actually want to discuss media. It's good.
Yeah, and I don't have any more super chats to go over, so we can just jump right into the next one.
Yep. You do that. Do you mind getting started on that? I might just quickly nip for a little bit of a toilet break, if that's okay.
That's totally fine.
Alrighty then. Back in a sec.
Hello, Rag. You are on the air.
Hello. Thank you for having me. So I think most of the like explicit points have been brought up about like what the actual canon breaking stuff is, but I want to go more kind of meta. Like, what if, because there's some points in the show where I feel like maybe it's okay to break canon a little bit, because I think Anakin's like the Immaculate Conception stuff. I just think the fact that it happened, I don't know how to say this. I just think that the Chosen One myth in general is just a bad thing. And so if they're getting rid of that idea, even if they do it in a really world-breaking way that makes it stupid, I think it overall helps the themes of the like original like 6 movies better, even if it messes up what like the original lore is.
So you're advocating for we should allow for plot holes as long as they overall improve the quality of the thing.
Yeah, like themes and themes and, you know, focus on storytelling over like world building, I guess.
I would argue that, like, you know, it is not an improvement of the overall quality if you have to like break continuity in order, you know, because like on the one hand you're sacrificing certain themes in order to maintain a good continuity, or you're sacrificing certain continuity to bolster good themes. And I don't like when that's treated as a dichotomy, because more often than not it's not a dichotomy. You can have both. But even just assuming it is, like, I think the thing about it is that like you can have a lot of the same good, you can have a lot of the themes that you want to have, like even with the Chosen One prophecy. And the thing is that like if you break canon enough times and in certain ways, and it does significant enough damage over time, then the themes don't really matter anymore. It's kind of just a jumbled mess, and it's really a slippery slope at that point. Like, how many times can we continue to add plot holes without just undermining the themes? Like, the main argument that people make against The Last Jedi is like there are a lot of good ideas here, there are a lot of good concepts, there are a lot of good themes, but like they're built on this foundation of sand. It falls apart the second you scrutinize it because of all the plot holes and all the really stupid character decisions and things of that nature. So I would argue that you should try to maintain continuity to the best of your ability, and if certain themes don't jive with what then gets established later on, you just have to go for new themes, I guess, or try to work around them and still make the themes you were going for initially.
Yeah, I totally get that, but one of my things is that if we're assuming that whatever George Lucas says about Star Wars is like basically true, then like the foundation of the Force itself, that there is a light side and a dark side, is so like inherently broken in its own world building that I feel like it's so hard to make a coherent world around that. And so at that point, you might as well just focus. Like, I don't like I enjoy The Last Jedi a lot, not because I think it's a good movie. I just think it's hilarious. Like it's in the so bad it's good, but I don't like care about all the lore break stuff. Like the Holdo maneuver, obviously terrible thing for world breaking, but like the impact behind it, like it still had an impact. There was definitely a lot of passion put into it, and I think its overall impact was a net positive. Because if we just had another Force Awakens type thing, I feel like it would have just been, again, more non-inspired and stuff like that.
I feel like we're presenting this as though it's a dichotomy when it doesn't have to be, and it typically isn't.
Yeah, but I'm saying that
I say it's not even that it has to be a dichotomy. Like it's just these things you can't, like, story justifies themes. Themes can't exist separate to story. Like if you're telling me like, oh, but I liked the themes and the story doesn't support them, what you're really just saying is I clap the sentiment. Which, like, sure, but that's got nothing to do with the story.
The example that I keep joking about with Jolly, where it's like, you know, you could have the scene in The Force Awakens where Kylo Ren stabs Han and throws him off a bridge, but then you could also have him turn to the camera and explicitly state the theme of this movie is that family is good. And it's like, but that doesn't work. Like the theme isn't that. Like technically that's a theme because that's what the movie's telling you the theme is, but like it doesn't work. Well, it's not built on anything. It contradicts what actually happens.
The thing is, we make that joke about Kylo Ren doing that in The Force Awakens, but the thing is that almost literally happened in TLJ, right? Where Rose was like, it's not about destroying what you hate, it's about saving what you love. And then, like, in the background of the shot, the First Order obliterates the rebels.
Yeah, it's like, and you watch that scene, and you're like, they did that on purpose, right? Like, that was intentionally contradictory because there's no way that was an accident.
I hope it wasn't an accident. I mean, I hope it was deliberate, but this is Rian Johnson, and I've seen Glass Onion, so I don't have any faith.
But also, Rag, I wanted to touch on a thing you said as well, that the idea intrinsically of there being a light side and a dark side of the Force thematically contradicts what we're going for with the original films. Is that what you said?
No, it's within the world breaking, like world building. The idea that there is a light, that the Force is one singular energy field, but also explicitly has two sides, a good side and a bad side, is like, that just makes no sense in any like interpretation. It's just a really weird thing to exist.
So that's not the interpretation of the original trilogy, though.
Well, I'll get to that in a second, Jolly. But like, are you saying that the version of the Force that we kind of have today, where like to keep it in balance, they're like light and dark have to be equal in power? Is that what you're saying thematically is contradictory?
No, just the fact that there is a dark side, because I guess it's not.
So
I guess it's, yeah. Sorry, you can go.
I was just going to say that, like, in the original trilogy, the dark side is a term that's used to define a specific like way of life, so to speak. It's not a literal like side of the Force. The Force is the Force, and it's good. And well, I mean, it's not anything really. It's an energy field that flows and exists within the currents of the universe, and that you can either choose the quote unquote light side by keeping in tune with it and being synonymous with it in a certain way. And, you know, it controls your actions, but also it obeys your commands and that sort of thing. Like, you become in sync with it. Or you can pervert that and the natural order of things by choosing the quote unquote dark side, which is essentially the quick and easy path that allows you like greater power much quicker, but like you also have to impose your will in a very unnatural and contorted way. And like that's what the original films, and even I'd say the prequels to a great extent, like mean when they say dark side and light side. It's not specifically that there is a energy field that has two sides to it, and one is good and one is evil.
Yeah, it's the closest analogy I can draw, because this is sort of what they were drawing from, is the concept of qi in Buddhism, but also like Tao and the Tao in Taoism. So basically, like, I don't know how much Eastern philosophy you know, but like the kind of central through line is essentially, yeah, what Steve just said. Like the Force is like this morally neutral, all permeating aspect of existence that just is, and like it is the natural order of the universe, and like everything flows in balance with it, because like it defines the universe in the way that like gravity is a fundamental force of the universe, and like it's just a thing that is. And so part of the thematic messaging of the original trilogy is leaning into that kind of philosophy of like, it's about like letting go of the self, letting go of your selfishness, of like your ego, your sense of individuality as a kind of like fiction you're imposing on the universe. Just let yourself be part of the whole, as opposed to the dark side, which is just like, no, you pervert that by like trying to force your own pattern onto the pattern of the universe, by like forcibly brutalizing reality to bend it to your will, as opposed to just living in sync with everything else. So in the dark side is just a catch-all term for individuals perverting the natural order,
the quick and easy path.
Yeah, rather than a description of like some quasi-demonic entity that exists as half of a whole.
Yeah, I get that. It's just that like the problem is that you still use the Force when you're using the dark side. Like if the dark side was something that was just more of a like personal thing, like the Force was this energy field that you could tap into and live in harmony with, and then if you didn't do that, then you were on the quote unquote dark side. But then that would be okay. But if you're still using that energy field and like being against it, then it's like going back to the Eastern religion, like a philosophy thing, like with Taoism. It's like if you were in sync with the Tao, but at the same time you like attacked it, you went completely against the flow, but you still used the Tao to go against the flow. It just doesn't make
the Tao refers to the pattern. But the Tao refers to the pattern, not the energy field. Like the energy is qi, the Tao is the pattern.
But also, like, I could ride a horse, and like, you know, I could show affection to the horse, and I could be like, for all intents and purposes, one with this horse, right? Like it accepts me as its rider, and it loves me the way I love it, and we ride together. Or I could sit back on a carriage and whip it and force it to run in the direction that I want it to, and I'm kind of getting the same result. It's still taking me to my destination, but like one is harming the horse and the other isn't. And that's kind of how I look at the Force, right? Like one is doing harm to the natural order of the universe by taking the Force as this thing that you can tap into and forcing it, no pun intended, to like move in the direction that you want it to, or you could just surrender to it and accept the flow as it is and try to live in harmony with that.
Right, because that's the point, right? The Force is a neutral thing. The Force isn't good or bad. What's good is living in accordance with the natural pattern that the Force operates in, you know, as a result of the universe's inherent design. The bad is trying to pervert the design. But using the Force to pervert the design is therefore why that's the dark side of the Force, right? It's using the Force in the manner in which it should not be used. But that doesn't mean that the Force itself has some kind of evil component to it, or a good component to it, for that matter.
At least until it was established in the prequels to have a will and an intent.
Yeah, and then it became God, and then all sorts of problems cropped up.
But I guess the issue then is the Force itself. Is the Force like? Are you saying that the Force is both the instrument and the like design itself? Like, because what I'm thinking when I think about the horse analogy, like when you're like to like be out of accordance with the Force, with the horse, like to beat it, you wouldn't use the horse to beat itself. You would use like a stick or like. I don't know what you'd be like I
guess in this analogy, the whip would be your own connection to the horse, right? Well, like you're able to use your own connection to the Force to force it.
There's a better analogy here. So, Red, I don't know how much of Lord of the Rings you know. Like, have you read the books?
Not at all, actually. It's on my list though.
Fair enough. So, in the Tolkien world, the way in which the universe was made, it was like literally it was sung into existence. It was a song. So the creator came along, made all the angels and gods, which is like the Valar and the Maiar, and was like, we're going to sing a song collectively, guys, and that'll create the universe. The universe literally is the song. It's going to go according to the way I've described it. Like the notes will be what I've written, do that. But as everyone was singing, one of them, a guy called Melkor, was like, I don't like your song. I want to have control of this. And so he tried to sing his own song in the middle and created a discordant note that ruined and poisoned the rest of the theme. Like, that's basically like the best analogy I can do for the Force, how the Force operates. Like the Force is just, sound, essentially. It's the organization, the natural organization of that sound is the pattern of the universe, which is the Tao, or the light side of the Force. You trying to sing your own song and forcing all the tones to do what you want them to do, that's the dark side, and it poisons everything else around it by clashing with what's there.
But the light side is the Force working through you, and the dark side is you working through the Force.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess that makes sense. But this is all, again, mostly OT stuff, because then prequels, like, and now it's like the Force has its own will. That's definitely, I feel like.
Because then,
yeah. But then, I think, but like thinking about with that idea, then just still it is that the Force, you're still saying that there is no like actual dark side. There's no evil in the Force. It's just like there's the one thing, and people can use it badly. There's still like the Jedi are kind of like they still have a very big monopoly. Like the thematically what's happening, what I see at least of the prequels and we're seeing in the Acolyte is the Jedi have this monopoly over the Force. Like that's what the was Aisha, I think, who said the line like it's not about it's about power and who gets to use it. And so Anasaya, yeah, sorry. And I think it's okay in this scenario. Like, because I guess, like, again, I get that it's not okay to, like, it's not, like, you don't have to, like, you shouldn't, like, ideally break storytelling, but I feel like that still clashes a lot with the idea of the chosen one, because then it's like, oh, this one person is, like, everyone, the Force is this, like, magical, is this, like, constant energy field that, like, is completely independent, but also there's this one person who's going to make all the difference, and so he's incredibly special. Whereas I feel like this now kind of by ruining Anakin's legacy by making him less special it makes more sense with how the Force itself works.
See, I think so. What you're arguing though is that like we should basically retcon and contradict what we understood about Anakin and the Chosen One from the prequels, so that like it like can flow better with the theme that we originally had before the prequels kind of perverted that. But what I would argue is that that's not actually what this is doing, and it's just taking something that's already a problem and making it worse.
Yeah, that's what I say. Because if your argument is like the Chosen One as an idea is inherently, well, not inherently, but is like as presented is bad and out of sync with the way the Force worked in the OT, I'm like, yes, I totally agree. That's why the Chosen One was a bad idea. It breaks things quite badly. However, yeah, this is not them going back to erase the idea of the Chosen One as like as a thing. This is them going back to add more on top of it, and this is not good. We're creating more problems. Is the point? We're not solving anything.
Yeah, I mean they haven't said anything explicitly. Like it's not clear what Osha and May's role is going to be. Like if they are chosen ones or not. I think if just the idea that, like even though it's incredibly stupid, the idea that immaculate conception can happen and it doesn't necessitate that someone is like God chosen, I think that's still better, because in the other scenario it's like, oh, this person had no father, okay, they're going to change the universe, and that's just how destiny works, you know?
Well, it's also like there's a side of this I find really funny, which is like the whole born of a virgin thing only really works if the chosen one is going to be like a human or a humanoid that has like two, from a species that has two sexes normatively. Because like, what about Jedi who are from like a race of lizard people?
Well, then maybe that explains why Osha and May are human, despite apparently having genetically been like in the womb of the Zabrak witch.
But like, you see what I'm getting at? It's like a bunch of Jedi must turn up who are like, oh yeah, I've only got one parent because that's just how my species works. We're all one sex.
What if there was a Force-sensitive
you're born of a virgin,
like a clone trooper, and they were just like, hey, I don't have a mom. I do have a father, so maybe I'm not the chosen one, but I don't have a mom. Is that close enough?
Yeah, if he was cloned from Omega, that would be fine. But because he's cloned from Django, they're like, no, you're born of a father. Sorry.
the prophecy specifically states.
Must be no father.
Yeah, the prophecy is doing genital inspections, just any chromosome inspections. Like the force is anti-trans. You heard it here first.
The force is just standing outside of like a gender like a woman's bathroom. Just no, take your pants off. Let me make sure. Just got to make sure.
Yeah, like the
There's
force is
also the
basically
Hutts,
J.K. Rowling.
which I don't believe this is in the Disney canon, but the Hutts are hermaphrodites. That'd be really funny, right? Like Jabba,
I guess they're all
was
fathers and mothers
a
then.
Jabba was a like biologically female when he had Rada, when she had Rada, I guess, if we're going with that. So like maybe Rada's the chosen one. You don't know.
Yeah, but yeah, I think it's just an issue then with just how the Jedi are going to react to this, because I get that it's not good to just say, oh, we need more context, so you can't say anything bad yet, but it feels very up in the air. Like I definitely think that what you're saying is gonna most likely happen, but there is still a chance that it doesn't go exactly how, like, it doesn't happen where like, oh, they immediately, like, the Jedi Council sees this and they're like, oh, they are the chosen one, and then Anakin comes around like, well, shit, I don't know what happens when I think is going on now. But
wouldn't that itself be an issue though? Because like the point we're raising is not like, oh, we think this specific thing is going to happen and that specific thing is bad. The argument we're making is anywhere you go from here, like any way you choose to interpret this, is going to lead to problems. So like, let's say that happens, right? The next episode, they take Osha back to meet the council, and they're like, oh, look, Master Yoda and council, we have found this person born of no father, very powerful in the Force. If they were then like, oh, okay, and they just didn't mention the Chosen One prophecy, that would be an issue because they know about that prophecy and they know about its criteria. So that would be a writing problem.
Again, Jolly, the prophecy's only 50 years old by the time of the Phantom Menace. The books don't matter.
God.
yeah, there's also thing that they like, because they like, all the Jedi don't, like, it seemed like Qui-Gon was the only one who actually cared about the prophecy in the original trilogy. Like they said, because also with the lore, I guess this is technically book lore, but wasn't it that like, at this point, the Jedi didn't believe in prophecy because they're like an old
Master
one.
and Apprentice, it was like established that Qui-Gon was kind of obsessive over prophecies, but the rest of the Jedi didn't really take any of them seriously or believe any of them were real.
Yeah, but
the problem is that the prequel movies have lines other than from Qui-Gon particularly in Attack of the Clones before Mace Windu changes his tune drastically, where they're telling Obi-Wan, they're like, no, you need to like give your apprentice more of a choice because we do actually think he might be the chosen one. Like, Mace is like, if he is the chosen one, he's the only one who can bring balance to the Force. So you have to cut him more slack.
Yeah, maybe they just thought that after they just thought that after the million contrivances at the final couple scenes in Force Awakens, like, how the hell did he do that? He's got to be the chosen one.
Yeah, it's like, Finn's like, we'll use the Force, and Harrison's like, that's not how the Force works, and then they pull it off, and Harrison's like, oh my god, you're the chosen one.
Yeah.
Honestly, Han's the chosen one, right? For fucking landing the Falcon on the planet while in atmosphere at light speed.
What you say that, but given the amount of contrivances that like surround Finn and where he's been and what he knows, like he is like an avatar of the Force at this point.
Immediately, Han's like, so what about your parents? Like, did you have a father? Are we sure you had a father? Let me check these generals.
I don't know. I was taken from a family I'll never know. So maybe I never had one. And they're like, oh my god.
Jolly. Someone in chat said that that's a deleted scene in reference to the thing you said about Mace Windu believing Anakin was the chosen one. I do remember there being a deleted scene where he talks to Obi-Wan about that, but I thought that most of that dialogue from that scene was then transferred over to the hallway scene with him, Obi-Wan, and Yoda. So I think it's still in there.
Because there is a deleted scene where he's walking Obi-Wan out to a ship on the platform where he says a lot of the same dialogue, but they moved that dialogue to the hallway scene, which is in the movie, where Obi-Wan is with Yoda and Mace, and they're walking down the corridor, and that's also where you get Yoda being like, Obi-Wan's like, oh, his abilities have made him arrogant, and Yoda's like, yes, arrogance, a trait even more common, even amongst older, more experienced Jedi. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So yeah, I'm like 100% certain that we do have the dialogue from Mace, where it's like, if the prophecy is correct, your apprentice is the only one who can bring the Force back into balance.
Okay.
There's also the fact that they just allow it, and also the fact that they just allow it anyway. Like, yeah, Yoda's got reservations, but like Yoda at the end of Phantom Menace is not saying, I don't think he's the chosen one. He literally says, the chosen one, the boy may be. Nevertheless, danger I sense in his training.
Okay, nerd.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think that's all the main points. I'm still holding out for this show, this whole thing was supposed to be defending episode 3. I didn't think it was like the worst thing ever. I didn't like it. I don't think it was good, But like, because I saw you reply somewhere that you gave it like a 1 out of 10. I give it like a 3 maybe. I thought it was at least intriguing, and I'm still intrigued in the show. I want to see where it goes. Partially just to see how badly they go from here.
Yeah,
or
that's the thing. I'm darkly fascinated to see where they go.
Yeah.
Well, that was my
intrigue.
That was my perspective going into the show to begin with. I'm darkly fascinated by where they go, what they do.
Yeah, but yeah, I just think I'm just kind of want to see what happens from now, and I don't want to take more of your time. Thanks a lot for having me on here.
Yeah, thanks for
Yeah,
coming
it
on.
was really good to have you on. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
With a darkly fascinating thing, I like the idea that it's like watching a Disney Star Wars show. It's a bit like if I was walking to the shops and like past a skyscraper and a man in a chicken costume was like on the roof being like, I can fly, like preparing to jump. And like you're looking up being like, well, there is technically a tiny chance like he could fly. Like I know he's going to crash and burn and this is going to be horrific and traumatize me for life, but I can't look away. Like I have to know how this ends.
I have to see this through to the end. Hello, Larry Banks. You are on the air.
Explodes.
Larry,
are you there? I think we might.
Hello.
Oh,
hello. Hi.
Yeah, sorry, my mic thing was turned off.
Okay.
Sorry. So, like, again, wait, quick question to Sheev and maybe to Jolly, like, because, like, one thing, like, because I've been like noticing, like, all throughout time on your Twitter and YouTube, towards like how much you guys really don't like Disney Star Wars. So, quick question: what like compels you guys to be like, you know what? Despite me thinking that these shows are pretty much shit, aside from maybe Andor, maybe Rogue One and Rebels, the rest of the shows has just been shit. Like, what compels you to go like, you know what? But I'm still gonna go check out the next one because I don't know, like. Because to me, if a series like just becomes so bad that only like one show is good out of like the dozens or so that aren't, like, it kind of makes me go like, unless I'm only doing this to get paid on YouTube, what compels me to go like, I'm gonna keep talking about this series that
I mean that like I won't lie and pretend that isn't part of it. My Disney Star Wars videos tend to do pretty well compared to the rest of my videos, and I'd rather not stop exploring that lucrative avenue, and I think it's fair to want to keep that going. There is also a sense of morbid curiosity, I guess, with I watch these just to see like what they do wrong, and you know what, if it's something like Andor, then great, I got another good Star Wars show out of it, and I can talk about that.
I know, but like, do you ever think you'll just reach like a, let's say like a, do you think you'll ever just reach a point of like, unlike of like towards let's say how like critical drinkers like me, like, you know what, I'm done, I reached my breaking point, like what, that's like, what, at what point do you go, I just reached my breaking point, I don't want to watch Star Wars anymore? At what point do you think that will ever happen, considering
Kenobi? So
yeah, especially I think on a personal perspective, like, speaking like, when did I stop expecting or hoping that it was going to be good? When did I fall out of love with Star Wars? And like, that's long since happened. The reason, other than what Sheev just said about like the financial reasons and like the morbid curiosity, I think the other side of it is like, this is something that we used to love, and so like we do carry on hoping that it will be good even when we don't have any like genuine feeling that it will be. And then the other side of it is just like, we're also operating in this weird space of like being critics, where like a lot of, and in Sheev's case, a critic with an audience that are very concerned with this topic specifically. Mm-hmm. It is very much like, I think, the responsibility of a critic to be like, I'm going to try and just give a fair review of something, regardless of whether I personally going into it think it'll be good or bad. You try and hold that subjective feeling in reserve and just do your job basically of providing the function of a critic. But as a personal viewer, there are plenty of shows, plenty of franchises I've given up on, which we don't cover. Like, I mean,
I don't remember the last MCU thing I've watched.
Oh yeah,
I think it was probably Guardians 3.
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, even with shows that like turn out to be good, like, so I really dislike League of Legends, for example. I think League of Legends is a terrible game, and I gave up on that very early on when I started playing it, a decade plus ago. So I didn't watch Arcane when it first came out because I just had no interest. And then my sister and some friends of mine watched it and were like, wow, that's fantastic. You should watch it. It's fantastic. And like, that's kind of what critics are for, right? So that when you have given up on a franchise, when you're like, you don't think it's worth your time to invest to find out, you have someone you can trust who can tell you whether it's worth going back to for a season of something.
Okay, it's just like kind of like one of those things that makes me go like, it's maybe it's just like how like the people like the critical drinker and the drawing Mauler are all like, I'm done with this franchise, but then they just keep coming back, and I'm like, okay, at least because I'm like you Sheev to whereas I can get it, like because I understand it to whereas okay, yeah, most of Star Wars CU is bad, but there's at least some good nuggets in there that makes me like look at it. To people like Mauler's like, oh, other than Andor, I essentially hate everything else, but I gotta keep watching. And I was like, dude, you're at the point to whereas you can just look at any other franchise and still like be profitable. Yeah, so I'm sorry for this tangent. I'm just like, it's like one of those questions where I check out your Twitters and stuff like that. It makes me go like, I wonder what compels someone who like no longer is in love with the franchise, like to basically be like. That makes me go like, okay, why do you guys keep like watching and review it when there's like considered like other like franchises
to be fair, I haven't fallen out of love with Star Wars. Like I still love Star Wars. I just don't like this weird perversion of it that it's become.
Well, at this point, like I'm just gonna be real. If you were to ask me, like Larry, like if George Lucas would have stayed in Star Wars, what would I think would happen? I think the result would have been more. We would have gotten like more shows like The Bad Batch, Ahsoka, Book of Boba Fett, maybe Mando, and like because I know like just looking at George Lucas's treatments, we still would have gotten like Luke exiling himself because of the failed Jedi Order, Mandalorians, Layla, like Luke's sister being like actual chosen one. It's like I don't know. It feels like no matter who would have gotten this franchise, stuff would have been controversial to say the least.
Yeah, and if it was bad, we would have called it bad. But like I don't know, that we don't live in that timeline. And frankly, if those are our only two options, I just would prefer that they hadn't continued it in any capacity.
Oh, anyways, like getting back to the subject at hand, like what do I defend of episode 3? To me, like I said, like I guess like from all the other points you talked to other people, it's like because my personal opinion on the show was I watched it all 3 in one sitting. I was at a friend's house, so where it was like okay, the first 2 episodes I thought were all right. This one, I just thought it was like mid. Nothing that makes me go like it's not like bad enough to make me go, I'm gonna drop this show, but not good enough to make me go, oh, I really liked it. But I don't know. I get it, like to where it's like the pacing's off, and I can tell why people didn't like it. But people call it like the worst thing ever. I'm like, I don't know, man. There's stuff from Book of Boba Fett that I think is worse, but yeah. But still, parts of this, I don't think this episode's really canon breaking because again, like others have said, like of how Anakin was born because the Force directly had Shmi birthed him. Meanwhile, for this one, we're not given the details, and it'll probably come up in a future episode, is that the 2 witches did something that that artificially created the twins. So as far as we can only go into theories. Now, my theory is more on the lines of like, okay, like maybe considering that one of the witches has like the features of the 2 sisters, she could have either like done like what Jolly said way back then is like I did some IVF type thing or magic just to make it happen, and like technically she would be the father, and if we were to take the prophecy as face value, not only the fact that like, oh, it has to be from like a virgin birth, but like it also states in canon as well as legend is that oh, the chosen one, through him the galaxy will bring balance, and it just mentions that the chosen one has to be male, and Yeah, it's like if you look at
it does say him, but again, like that's there's a kind of element of like we're translating whatever the Star Wars language of BASIC is to English.
Well, it's also a matter of
there's
like,
wiggle room there.
Like the prophecy might have said him, but like it could be referring to anyone as long as they're born of no father.
Again, like I said, it's always a thing with like George Lucas, to where he intentionally made it vague, just so like because by his own words, just so like he could create stories around it. Whereas, what probably could contradict this is actually explain how like vague the prophecy is when dealing with, let's say, the Chosen One and all that.
I'm just saying that I don't think like if the Jedi were like had May and Osha brought before them, and they met all the criteria that like you'd expect for the Chosen One, but they're like, oh, but they're girls, so they can't. Like, I don't think that would be a rule that they strictly adhere to.
I'm just saying, like, it's just like one of the things that makes me go, okay, it's technically not canon breaking. Yeah, another point is that again, like, I think as others has like said before. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting. It's just like it's been kind of a long stream. I've been like putting this on the background, but like maybe I just need some reminders. Like I do think really like let's say like the reason why the Jedi were there is like compared to like, oh, why don't they exterminate the Night Sisters and all that. I think it's primarily because of the fact that like maybe like this particular coven like did something way more noticeable than the Night Sisters ever did, which is even though they're at such a shell of their former self, like has like some Jedi come in and be like, all right, check on them, and then from what I've heard from the show, what I saw from the show, it's like the Jedi said like, no, we heard whispers of a child being born here.
I mean, so like it could be that the Sith, or not the Sith, the witches in question here, did something so atrocious that it caught the Jedi and the Republic's eye, and they were like, we need to fucking deal with them. They are a threat. They're bad. Like they did something horrible. Like maybe they committed a massacre or something. But like the witches themselves are treating it as though like they've done nothing wrong and they're being wrongfully persecuted. And
that's always the thing with
as though it's like bad and like they're the victims, and it's not like they're trying to deceive anyone. They're only talking to themselves. They know what they did.
Yeah, like that's always the case. To where it's like we're seeing the different perspectives of like what two different cultures mean. Whereas, so unless like the show really goes more into detail, we can just really just like I think this is just a case of like not taking it at face value, because for all intents and purposes, these witches may have done something bad, but to them it was good kind of deal. So I'm like, okay, I think that's really the purpose of this like episode, to where it's not only to show bits of the past of the twins, but to show like different perspectives of like how other people feel the Force, and how like, oh, I wonder what could have caused this sort of conflict between them and the Jedi kind of deal. And the future episodes will explain all this. I think like to me, it's just a case of like, okay, we've like for all intents and purposes, the Coven may have done something that made them flee the galaxy. For the Jedi, it's like, oh, why don't we exterminate them? I think it's because, again, despite the fact that they will like deal with like conflict harshly, if they feel as if like, oh, maybe like let's start a genocide. Like as far as this canon goes, like let's not like entirely genocide them. Like we've already deal with like the major issues of this cult, and they're no longer harmed. And like, let's see what happens. And they see like the cult hasn't harmed anyone yet. So like, okay, let's just send like a small investigating team just to check on them every once in a while we deal like the other bigger threats in the galaxy. Like in the High Republic books, it states that there's this like dark side group called the Nameless, who has been a more bigger threat. They're not big enough to threat to whereas that would contradict the whole like, oh, there's been 1,000 years of like galactic peace. It's just a case of like it's in a big region, but not so much that it caused like galaxy-wide threat, right? So like they did it with threats such as that. Meanwhile, this covenant is like, okay, this threat is no longer like this threat is no longer like viable to fully put our full intention into it. I'm sorry for like rambling a bit. It's just like I'm trying to give some context towards how I think the reason why like, oh, why don't like was said earlier of why don't the Jedi just like debated this with someone like, why don't they just like exterminate them? And I'm trying to give like my reasonings.
The point I was making was like, because I'm not sitting here being like, I genuinely think the Jedi wants to go and exterminate groups they don't like. The point I'm making here is that like, when we're trying to ascertain the reasons why the Jedi are here on Brendok, there's only two sets of reasons, right? It's either for the witches themselves or for the girls specifically. And either way you interpret it leads to problems. Like if you interpret it as them being there for Brendok, for the Coven, them happening upon the girls and the way in which they interact with the girls creates issues. And if they're there for the girls, we still have issues just in a different direction, basically.
All right, so like for the former, I think it's because of the fact that like, okay, they still check up them once in a while. Like I said, this is probably a Coven group that's probably was from the Night Sisters, but drastically went off the different direction, which now they have like multiple members of like other species with them, and like again like this particular Coven may have done something like way more like either like major that caused like the Jedi to keep checking up on them, and then that's when like I heard them say like, oh, there's whispers like to them, like there's whispers that like, oh, like there's kids here with like special powers being born, and that's when like the whole Jedi's like, hey guys, go check up on them. And like also like this thing of like how you guys mentioned about how like how come like why did like the twins' mothers said like, oh, they have no father. I think it's because of the whole like I said, Jedi's can like sense people's like I think just as like what Saul did in like episode 1 investigating a murder, to whereas he knows how like someone was lying, so like the witches know it's like, oh, these Jedi are actually more experienced. They could like perhaps sense if we're lying, so that's the reason why they say like, oh, we have no father, because technically they're speaking, they're like they're saying truth, but they're lying by omission, to where it's like by truth by omission, to where it's like, oh, let's just say words that won't get the Jedi to be like, like to really be like, okay, to make them think like, okay, maybe they're completely hiding something that we should know, because like I said, when they get to the council chamber alone, because before like the mothers were like, oh, these are our twins are birthed through the Force, the miracle, but inside it's like, oh, well, we did something that if the Jedi really learn about this, they would have either come to arrest us or kill us. So that's why we actually keep it a secret. Like, that's my interpretation of why they said it, because like I don't think it's a case of like we have to take them at face value. It's just a case of like them just lying by omission. And because like yeah, if you want to respond to it, you can
go. I think the thing with like I kind of said this to the guy before Red, which is I'm in a way I'm happy that like a lot of fans do sit there and like try to make sense of what they see, right? That they go like, oh, maybe this or maybe that or maybe this. That's a good impulse. Like,
and here's the thing, Jolly. This is the thing. I don't think of that as like, oh, I'm trying like to I'm trying to write for the writers kind of thing, like what Mahler tries to do. Like, I don't think it's the case. It's just a case of like, there's just to me enough good inference for me to go like, it could be this way, it could be that way. And that's the thing. Like, I think like this is the thing about how nerd culture overall kind of like split into this kind of style that people like Mueller kind of does, to where it's like before I was like, we don't get all the information of today's episode, so maybe let's theorize. Like, let's talk like maybe we talk like either laugh at some parts that's bad or admire some parts that are good, and we can like theorize for the next and see what the next episode will do. Nowadays, it's like a case of like, oh, if we don't get like this much attention in this specific way, now it's like, oh, this is the worst thing ever. The Hell Writers are hacks, and I'm like I don't know. It's like maybe just like there's like because I mean, like right now, it's like, okay, there's probably enough, and it's still the episodes are still kept vague towards, okay, we'll learn it later on in the episode.
Well, hang on. So there's a thing here, just to sorry to cut you off mid-flow, but there's a kind of confusion I think that happens a lot here, where people go like, oh, I have, there's ambiguity, therefore I have room to make it like reasonable inferences. And I'm like, the problem is that like that's not what we see in shows like this, right? Like, there's a very important distinction that needs to be made between things being ambiguous, where they can be interpreted in multiple ways, which each of those, each different way makes sense and provides you with like a slightly different theme, but they all kind of work, versus we have a plot point that is left intentionally vague because any answer we give to it wouldn't work, would be wrong, would cause a problem. Like, to give like an example of the former case, right? Like the end of Shutter Island, the movie, is spoiler alert for everyone who hasn't seen Shutter Island. Mute me for the next whatever minutes if you want to go in unspoiled. But the end of the movie is like Leonardo DiCaprio's character, who has found out during the movie that he is actually a mental patient who believed he was somebody else, right? And if he didn't end up cured, they were going to lobotomize him. At the end of the movie, he seemingly reverts back to his old personality, and they take him off to be lobotomized. But then he gives a little line to Mark Ruffalo's character where he's like, "Is it better to live as a good man? Die as a good man, or live as a monster?" And depending on how you interpret that quite ambiguous line, you could either say he did revert, or he's faking it because he doesn't want to live with the knowledge of who he actually is. Right? Those are two interpretations that both make sense, that both tell you different things and give you different themes to the movie. That's not what we get in Star Wars, at least not in current Star Wars. What we get now is something like, mystery. How did the Jedi know about these girls on Brendok? Or did they even know about the girls on Brendok? And the problem is you then go, well, if they didn't, then we have this problem. And if they did, we have this problem. So it seems like nothing really works, actually.
Well,
and so
to me, it's like
only works as long as we don't address it.
Well, again, I'm trying to address towards how do the things of because what the Jedi says we heard whispers of whispers that the children were born, so they had to to learn towards by at the very least check up on them. That makes me go okay, checked up on them. They've heard they heard something unusual, and now they're coming in to check. To really check them on in person, and so okay, and see and then realize there's children there, and that's the reason why I try to be okay, let's test them out, and all that stuff.
To test these children, they're having to break a lot of rules that they wouldn't ordinarily break. Except a massive exception has been carved out for these children, and so the question becomes why. Is just you can't just hand wave that. It has to be addressed into all this decision making.
Well, considering how again Dave Filoni, as much as people may not like him here, is he is, for better or worse, George's apprentice. And I think recently there was there was an art. Well, that's what George.
Well, no, that's not what George says. This is something that Dave says. So, I feel like it's important to kind of nip this because it gets said a lot. Disney and Dave Filoni like to go oh, well, he was George's hand-picked successor. But then anytime you actually go and find an interview, in fact, there's literally a panel that was just Dave and just George, where Dave tries to be oh, I was basically hand-picked, and George was yeah, you were one of the people, you were there. This idea that Dave is some kind of new George is not true. But even if it was, just to entertain this, that doesn't mean that Dave is good, because George made lots of mistakes. George also created a lot of problems in Star Wars. He's not the Messiah, right? George is a very great creative in many ways, but he also did a lot of damage to Star Wars, and that can't be ignored. So just to be Dave is the new George, therefore carte blanche.
I'm just saying I was just trying to make it in ways of he is an apprentice in the sense of in a sense also I was about to say in a sense he does there was another interview that Dave did to where he checks up on Lucas and be hey George, hey George, what do you think about these new series? And as far as I can tell, George for the most part enjoys much of the current Disney shows, and he gives them tips and all that stuff. And it even said I have an open back door for George to come back if he wants and all that stuff. So I'm just looking at this, and I can almost feel something. Okay, Dave was with George for a significant part of the prequels and all that stuff. I think in this case to where it's I think because Dave would have known because there was a lot of times to where Dave asked her wait George in this in the prequels this and that this isn't happen this doesn't happen in the prequels and George would just tell Dave, hey look, no, we're going with this. and like stuff like maybe like what other people have been like called lore contradictions. George will say, "Hey, no, in this context, this works, even if like others may not think so." So I think like in this case, like Dave knows about like the lore of George Lucas. In this case, I think it's the exception of like, oh, how come like before in the prequels they didn't accept like Anakin because he was like 8 or too old. Like I know this may be in theory territory, but I can either see it unless like there's a reason to where it's like, oh, maybe it's just like a ploy for the Jedi to be like, okay, we realize this cult has like a child of unknown means, so let's take her in so we can test her. Like I feel like as a theory that I may have like came up is that like maybe there is kind of like a sort of like a small program to where it's, hey, let's see if we can get candidates to be like pupils for the Jedi, even if they're really old. And it's like, okay, and like maybe there's like a program that will come up to later on the show, and like and Osha was like one of the first candidates, but because again, like we see her like leave the order after like a certain period of time, it could be the case of like, well, they tried doing that and then they just, and what few successes there was just too many failures for them to accept anyone anyone that's older and like let's say 3 or 4. So now they just revert back to their whole
hang on though, because like we were explicitly told in episode 1 that this was an exception, that this is not like some new phenomenon where they tried this for a while and then went back.
She says, and I quote, "My circumstances were unique, but the Jedi Council made their exception, or made their decision rather."
Oh,
so
yeah.
This is unique. Well, yeah. This is unique to Osha.
So this is unique to Osha. Like, but can you repeat that again? Because I thought she said something about Anakin real quick. I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
Me?
Chief, do you want?
Yeah.
Oh, she said my circumstances were unique, but the Jedi Council made their decision. This was in regards to the fact that a concern was brought up that she was too old and that she still had like attachment issues and was still grieving the death of her family.
Again, like I could maybe see like let's say Saul maybe like did some things behind the scenes to where let's try to get Osha in like maybe because like he felt like, because again like maybe like considering how like Qui-Gon Jinn the character is inspired by, maybe he did try to get Osha into it and like did some things behind the scenes to make sure she did.
Well, and the council, if you remember, the council denied Qui-Gon. Qui-Gon was like, so will he, like what's your decision? And the council were like, no, he will not be trained. So it doesn't matter that like, and to speak to that as well, like there's good reason for them to refuse Saul, because as Vanestra points out to Saul, he is unusually attached to his Padawans, and like he is a bit of an outlier even amongst the Jedi. Like he is the Qui-Gon of his era, essentially. Just having Saul doing some, lobbying for her behind the scenes, I don't think is enough to get her in, considering we saw that Qui-Gon did the same thing and it didn't work.
Again, I'm trying to like think if it's like
even if they did concede on the basis of Saul fought for her, what reasons did he provide that would have changed their minds? Like beyond might be the chosen one. She was born of no father. Potentially has a high midichlorian count. They did test her midichlorian count, but like we didn't see the results of that.
I think like I said, other than like if like let's say Osha is like is strong in the potential force, I don't think it's a case of like, oh, she may be like chosen one levels of potential. Maybe just a case of like, oh, she has a bit more higher midichlorians than the average candidate for like users, and maybe there's like
that wouldn't be enough. Like even Anakin, who the council were like fairly like at least willing to entertain, might actually be the chosen one, and who was the most powerful they'd ever tested. Even then, they were like, "No, sorry, you're too old."
Well, again, like I just think this might be a case of like, okay, maybe there's like some. Again, like I said, we'll have to check if like let's say the future episodes. I think it'll probably explain it more. It's just like as of right now, to me, I'm trying to.
Well, hang on. What kind of justification could a future episode provide that would excuse this?
I think it's like again like maybe there's like I think like one theory, like one of my cousins say is like is the fact that like, maybe like like one of the Sith like infiltrated like the Jedi, like made this whole elaborate scheme to where it's okay. Normally the Jedi would just like, let's say, refuse Osha, but maybe there's like some kind of scheme to like, okay, get Osha in it, like learn from some things, and then like
hang on, but given that the entire like the Sith's most important thing right now, like the absolute top of their priority list is remain anonymous, don't be discovered. Is it not insanely dangerous, like ludicrously risky, to try and infiltrate the Jedi Order as a Sith, or to send an untrained acolyte to do that for you?
Oh yeah. In terms of a beginner acolyte like of Misha, like I said, like it's an acolyte for all intents and purposes, like the Rule of Two Sith, like like at this point in time, like the Sith at this time, it was like, okay, let's just grab as much Jedi users, I'm Force sensitive people as we can, like perhaps like train them up a bit, but don't give them the full details, just enough to make you go like, okay, we're just some like other random group that are opposed to Jedi. Here's some missions, see if you survive, and this might be a case of the acolytes, like this mortality rate is so high, it's like, okay, so high that like the Jedi just don't really know that all these are coming from the Sith, because for all we know, like again, the Jedi has a lot of enemies, so it could be from a rival or bounty hunters, all that. And it's like I don't think May was like given enough information about the Sith that makes me go like, oh, she knows everything. Like, let's say she was captured and forced to say everything. I don't think it's enough to make me go like, oh. Like, even with the red lightsabers, like there has been cases where other people like the Nameless has like red saber twist.
Sorry to interrupt you, but like your time has run out. I'm afraid. Like,
dang it.
Up. We need to do this to be fair to everyone.
I'm sorry for like rambling, but like it's nice to speak to you guys about this again. Personally,
course,
I don't think this. I don't know. It's like I don't know. I don't think this is lore breaking. Like, you sure. Subjective opinions, like we can each decide whether or not this is how executed this was, but I don't know. Maybe there's like more information I could talk to Sheev, like let's say on Discord or DMs or Twitter. But like other than that, like I don't know. Like I don't think the show is like
Sheev does have a Discord server, which I'm sure he will link in the description.
I link it in all the descriptions. You people always act like I don't fucking advertise.
No. I said like there's also like Twitter, but like. Yeah, like I'll probably like maybe one day go on Discord and talk more, but I'm sorry, it's like I have like notes. It's just like me, like I'm not always a good speaker, and this is like my first time. It's like one of the few times I speak to people, and I mean, I could have done a better job, but I don't know. I just don't feel as if right now, like even with episode 3, all we're given is like this is canon breaking as of right now. Because again, I still believe the case of like, oh. Like again, Anakin was born directly from the Force. Like the witches use the Force.
We gotta go ahead and
yeah. Well, I'm gonna leave. Well, thanks for having me on. Bye.
Thanks for coming on, man.
It was good to have you on. All right. Have a good night.
Okay. So, people always act like I don't fucking advertise the Discord. Sheev Talks Hate was getting mad at me. Sheev Talks Hate was getting mad at me because I'd advertised it on a bunch of videos, and then it got too popular, and he was like, "No, it's not the same anymore." And now he's like, "Advertise it, you asshole!" And I'm like, "What do you want from me?"
Well, hang on, whoa! You have a server? I didn't know this.
No, I don't have a Discord server.
Oh, okay. I thought you might have one. You should probably get one as a YouTuber. Like, that's probably a useful thing for you to have for your fans to maybe like hang around, talk about Star Wars, shoot the shit, like just get to know you better, basically.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and announce this. We're about to more or less try to round this out. So we're accepting 2 more people on, but we have a few people in this lineup here. So unfortunately, not all of you are going to be on today. I'm very sorry to anyone who's been waiting in the weeds for a few hours. We just can't sit here all day. And also there are a couple more super chats that we've gotten that I wanted to go ahead and address. before we move on to our next guest. So let's see, where are we at? I believe this is our next one up from Kawibo for 1999. Thank you very much for the super chat. I'm at work, so I can't come on, but if the Sith are aware that you can't create, what are these FSs?
Force sensitives, I think.
If the Sith are aware that you can create Force sensitives, what's the point of finding an apprentice? Build your own. Why does Palpatine need Rey? He can groom his own army to life force suck or possess. Yeah, exactly. We kind of went over that already, right? Like, it doesn't make sense. You're just adding more holes to an already broken continuity.
It's I mean, we've already kind of said, like, you know, the deliberately vague because you can't flesh it out because you break anything that like Filoni engages in, like Schrodinger's plot point, we call it. There's that. And then there's stuff as well where people go like, oh, isn't this a cool idea? And they put it in and they just don't think about the ramifications. Like, was it Nepenthe as well?
Oh my God, yeah.
In the Mandalorian season 3. Like, this exists? This is a thing? Oh my God.
Yeah. And then another one from Kawibo for $9.99. Thank you once again.
Wow. Kawibo is very generous.
He is indeed. We appreciate. And granted, I'm sure the answer is going to be it was a once in a lifetime miracle, which at this point the writer's is just the writer's pen burning a hole through the page. What a weird, like, what once in a lifetime miracle? Like, what does that even mean in this case? Like, it can only performed once in a fucking blue moon or something.
Yeah, it's like they do that like
all the stars have to
years.
align. You can create a fucking Force baby.
Well, just like, yeah, every 100 years it happens. Yeah, also it happens. Like, they're like, Master Yoda, I found a new chosen one. It's like, oh, 7th time in the last 700 years.
Yoda was actually there for like 6 of them. Yeah. In fact, he did one of the rituals himself. That was when he was young and foolish.
That's where he is now. He's making Anakin.
Getting everything right, I must. And then Zenith Creation, $5 super chat. Thank you very much. Coming in late to the stream, I didn't have a problem with how they were born due to Palps' talk with Anakin in episode 3. I see how it mixed up episode 1, though. Yeah, so the thing is that Palpatine was lying. The thing, like, people point to that scene to defend Palpatine coming back in Rise of Skywalker as well, but, like, if you actually watch Revenge of the Sith, you realize that Palpatine is bullshitting him. He doesn't actually know the secret to creating life. Neither did Plagueis. Or if Plagueis did, then the secret died with him. Because then once Anakin actually does betray the Jedi and join him, he goes, yeah, so by the way, don't actually know how to do it, but I'm sure we'll figure it out if we really put our noses in books, you know?
Yeah, literally. Also, to cheat death is a power only one has achieved, but if we work together, I'm sure we can discover its secrets.
Palpatine was not made aware of the witch coven that did it like 40 years before he was born.
Which is weird if the Sith are involved with this. No, like, if the Sith were involved with this, how did he not know? Oh, goodness. I guess there's also something like, I sort of agree with the super chat that, like, I don't have a problem with the idea of people can use the Force to make other people. In a world where we didn't have the chosen one, that would be fine. The issue, and even then, it's like, there's still, yeah, you know, you can find ways to make it fine. But then you just run into all these problems, like what the Jedi know, what the Sith know, who knew what and when and where, and it just doesn't work in terms of like the canon.
Yeah. All right. So those are all the super chats that we have. Got 2 more coming on. So first is Wisdom. Hello. Oh, okay.
and then vanished. Well, okay.
I wasn't sure if that was our friend Wisdom Minari, because he has the name, but I can't read the full name here. And I don't know where his profile picture is. I'm going to go ahead and kick him, though. All right. Then we have Starchy Duke. Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, so just a little bit of context. I just started watching like last week, so I'm a little bit new to your channel. Watch your Clone Wars, really good. I agreed with a lot of it. I was surprised I agreed with a lot of it. I saw the thumbnail and I thought it was going to be garbage.
I get that a lot, don't worry.
Yeah, and another thing, haven't had a chance to check out your channel yet, Jolly, but on my list. And I'm honestly surprised that you make such long content. That also must take a really long time. But anyways, to my points. So I'm a little confused because I see it a lot around online. There's a scene in The Phantom Menace where Ki-Adi-Mundi looks over to Yoda after he says, "The Sith have been extinct for 1,000 years." And then Yoda doesn't answer. So a lot of people say that that's kind of a justification for why this show has the Sith in it, but I just don't get it, and there's a lot of contrivances with that in the first place. So
What with the Sith existing?
well, no, with the fact that he says the Sith haven't existed for 1,000 years or for a millennia, and then he looks over to Yoda. Yoda doesn't answer, and then that's the whole scene. So a lot of people say that because Yoda doesn't answer, the Sith could have existed for those 1,000 years with the Jedi knowing, and yet
with the Jedi knowing. I was about to say, like, there's no
Yeah.
reason they couldn't have existed for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah, no, that doesn't work. Sorry. Like the fact that Yoda doesn't answer doesn't excuse the idea that, like, literally, because Mace Windu in the very next sentence goes, "I do not believe the Sith could have returned without us knowing." And like Yoda answers him by going, hard to see the dark side is. So the implication is that, like, Mundi was asking the room at large, or rather was expressing incredulity to the room at large. Windu shared in that incredulity, and Yoda was like, well, maybe we just dropped the ball. Like the problem is, like, again, like, if you want to try and I say you in a general sense, I don't mean you specifically. Like, if someone wants to come in and be like, well, maybe they did know the Sith were around and Yoda just kept it to himself. I'm like, you do realize that damages Yoda's character quite badly. If he knew the Sith were back and just didn't tell anyone, god damn. Like, oh boy, that's some bad implications for Yoda's character going forward.
I'm just wondering,
sure
like, why he would even do that. Like, why would he do that?
Maybe he's a Sith.
Oh.
Yeah, so, but to actually get on to track about episode 3, like, so far I thought this was probably the best episode. That's just my opinion. I thought the background was sorely needed, and I think the first 2 episodes were kind of dumb. I watched your last live stream, and like the time difference when the ship crashes is just one of many examples. It doesn't make any sense. First 2 episodes were not my favorite. So far I'm liking the characters, but yeah, there's just lots of contrivances. But I definitely think that, like, I've also seen online a lot of like reviews, a lot of like videos about this topic, and a lot of people are like, oh, well, why is there just a pile of dead witches in one of the scenes? And how I interpreted that is, like, we're going to get that in a later episode, because I found this episode to be a lot more in the perspective of Osha than any other character. So I just, do you agree with that? Or
no, I do. Yeah, that's exactly what we think is going on.
All right. Yeah, I just wanted to get that out of the way, because I've seen other people think that it's just like, oh, well, they just are all dead and their explosion happened and they're just in a pile, which is weird.
Something else is clearly amiss, because I can believe that Osha, because she didn't really probably get a good look at the bodies, like, if she even saw them at all. I don't think she did. Like, I can believe that she might have just assumed all those witches died in the fire, but, like, we are clearly shown that is not what happened. None of their bodies are burned. They're all in like a formation, like in a pile or a circle or something, and it's weird. Like, something else happened, clearly.
Yeah, and when she wakes up, she like barely even remembers like what happened as well, which is
that I guess this is the thing of, like, in a better written continuity, that kind of discrepancy would lead me to be like, ooh, maybe there's something interesting they're doing here. But with Osha waking up and being like, I don't remember what happened, even though I literally saw it, I just go, I don't know if they're setting something up or whether the writer is just really, like, has forgotten that Osha saw this 2 seconds ago.
It's kind of the same as, like, Jolly pointed out that Sol is the one who told Osha that May started the fire, even though, like, he really shouldn't have any way of knowing that, and Osha would, because she watched it happen. And, it's like, if this was a better written show, we might assume that was setting up for something, and maybe it is. But, like, it seems just as, if not more likely, that was just a slip up on the writer's part, and it's not actually going to mean anything.
I mean, again, to be clear, I'm not in the camp of being like, we should assume it was a writer fuck up. I'm just saying, like, I
just think
really
it probably
is.
Yeah.
That shakes out.
Yeah. So another thing I wanted to bring up was, again, I see people online, like, I follow anyone who's talking about this show right now. I've honestly looked for any videos on it, and I've seen people also question like that they're ruining continuity with describing the Force differently. Like when Osha's mother, not the Zabrak, but I forget her name.
Anasaya?
Yeah, Anasaya. When Anasaya is describing the Force, she describes it as like a thread, and people found that continuity breaking because they're saying that the Force is a completely different thing than it already is. But I actually think that's a cool addition because it's showing like how different cultures interpret the Force.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I don't see any issue with them being like we we view it as a thread, and also like that leads to interesting implications. Which, to be fair to the show, they sort of hint at, which is, based on the language you use to describe a concept, the way in which you think about it is going to change, right? Like it's like how in Romance languages like Spanish or French, the gender of a word leads to like certain cultural differences in terms of how they would approach how they would use a word compared to the English speakers who might have like a masculine version of it rather than a feminine. It's the same thing here. Like the fact they call it a thread, view it as a thread, kind of view the whole universe apparently as like a tapestry that you don't, that you just go with, is really cool. It is slightly undermined by the fact that they basically present it as like a more extreme version of the Jedi's pacifism, where they're like, oh, you don't use the Force, you live with it entirely. And then in the very same scene, she uses the Force to like in a combat scenario, right? Which is a little bit odd, but I do agree that like just the idea of having a thread culture is totally fine. In fact, it's a good thing to see other cultures' perspectives.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. I also kind of like how like overall the Jedi have been kind of dumb. Like they like if we see how it's going to play out, like I think it's going to play out, and how it's pretty obvious that it's going to play out, then the Jedi should totally know that the Sith exist. But and that's just them being dumb in this show. But I do like how they're portrayed as like these kind of like religious, like crusader-esque, like enforcing the will of a religion onto others who are kind of who are already broken, who are already who have already been driven outside of the Republic borders. Yeah, I kind of like how they're depicted as more like enforcing their religion instead of like crumbling basically on corruption, which they are doing in this show. They're even like basically entirely reset a line where like our political enemies will multiply if we reveal this to the public. Like they show corruption as well, but I also like how they're showing how they're more religiously like imposing in this version.
Yeah, I actually would agree with that as well. Sheev, I don't know what you think, but like we're very much in the camp of prequel Jedi and before, kind of like I say Banite era of Sith Jedi are inherently becoming worse and worse as they go on because of how they're woven into this super state structure and all the compromises they're having to make to live
and how
within
the
that
Sith
structure.
are manipulating that as well, like
Yeah, to
actively trying to
accelerate.
undermine the Jedi in every way they can.
Yeah, like the Sith are actively contributing to the acceleration of the decline of the Jedi. But the Jedi, like, there's a great bit in, I think it's the Revenge of the Sith novelization where Yoda's fighting Palpatine, and like halfway through the fight, Yoda's like, I can't win because we, the Jedi, lost this battle 1,000 years ago when we decided to sign up to being like enforcers for the Republic and all the mentality that went along with that. Whereas the Sith evolved and adapted and took advantage of that. We're still stuck in those ways, and that's I need to go basically.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's funny. Then he then tries to make Luke the same thing, but oh well. But yeah, it is. I do like the way the show shows like the outside perspective of the Jedi as like as a state organization being like much more imposing and threatening, and like even the manner of the conversation where like the Jedi are technically coming across as quite polite and like, oh, we apologize for intruding and we were just checking in, and oh, we would love to meet your children. It's all done, like it sounds very polite, but you have walked in with a weapon on your hip with the might of a state behind you and quoted laws at people, and the tacit threat is very much in their face. That incredibly I hate to use the word because of the Sith name, but the incredibly insidious use of like polite power, soft power is really interesting to behold. I actually think that's a good step that the show is trying to do.
Yeah, and again, people are getting mad about that who are technically like on our side, quote unquote, like they're very anti-acolyte that are like, no, Jedi were the good guys, and you're not supposed to depict. I'm so tired of depicting the Jedi as bad, and it's like, what do you think is happening
I'm
here?
starting to feel like Treebeard, you know, and they're like, whose side are you on? I'm like, sides? I am on nobody's side because nobody is on my side, little ones.
Well, yeah, and it also like develops Jedi further. Like, why wouldn't you want Jedi with more nuance? Like, I don't get why you would want Jedi with less nuance.
Oh,
I'd go even further in saying that if all the Jedi were just strictly good completely for all that 1,000 years, and then suddenly by the prequels they had all that corruption, I'd be like, where the fuck did that come from?
So it came in when Yoda instituted the hookers and cocaine policy.
That was only in 72 BBY, my mistake.
Say no to death sticks. Go rethink your life.
Yeah, that's also where the prophecy came from. It's like Uriel got really high one day and was like, "Oh, a kid born of no father will
like
save
Doug,
us all."
Like Doug Corset, he predicted 93% or something.
Yeah, Michael's just there in the good place, being like, "Holy shit, I can't believe Uriel got that."
They put a picture of him up on the wall. I'm sorry, I just binged like the entirety of The Good Place over the last like 5 days, so my head is just full of Good Place references.
Oh, absolutely. Like little aside to everyone in chat is like, if you want to watch a really good show that's actually like got good continuity and good characters, The Good Place is excellent, and you should definitely watch that.
Yep.
All right. So I kind of started this talk by saying I liked this episode. So, and I would give it like a generous 4.5 out of 10. I don't know, like where would you guys place this as like ranking wise?
Didn't we say like, because after we watched it, we literally like we had a small discussion about it.
Yeah,
I was at about a 1. I think maybe like if I was being super generous, a 1.5. The issue I have is the only things I can find in its favor is the presentation, which has been a consistent thing with the show, right? It's like it just looks better than a lot of the more recent Disney schlock we've been given. And I don't want that to be ignored because, like, my God, is it nice to actually have a good looking show for once. That isn't Andor. But that is very surface level because I try and think of like what I would award points for anything else. Like characterization, no, that's been pretty terrible. Like Soul's the only character who I think has been given any kind of consistency at all. Performances, maybe like a lot of the time it's good, but then occasionally you get lines like Amanda Stellenberg's weird sudden yelling in the middle of the prison break scene. That was very strange. Continuity's out the window. Plotting is dreadful. There's contrivances left, right, and center. You know, new canon has been introduced that is very bad, and where the implications, if they pay it off in certain ways, will be even worse. I struggle to give it anything really beyond 1 or a 1.5.
Yeah, I understand your arguments. That makes total sense. I generally like, even I guess the 4.5 is more influenced about opinion than like actual show goodness, because like any Star Wars that I watch, I will enjoy. Like, believe it or not, there were parts of Ahsoka and parts of Kenobi I enjoyed. They were
blasphemy.
They were really bad continuity wise, but it was fun to watch.
Quick, rush this man to the OR. He needs a CAT scan.
Dude, I like The Force Awakens, and you know what? If I'm drunk enough, I like The Rise of Skywalker too. You do not have to convince me that it's okay to like something that's bad. Trust me.
No, I agree. I totally agree.
Yeah. So that's like, speaking of like the sequels, like I think the problem with this show is that it's a show, not a movie, set before the prequels. I think that because it is a part of canon now, and because it is before the prequels, it's going to struggle because it has to hold up 9 movies, a dozen shows, and any books that are still left in canon. So it has to hold up so much. And I feel like that's something really hard to do. Like,
I mean, it could also just be completely separate from those movies. It doesn't have to connect to them.
Yeah, I was about to say like something like when before the show came out, Sheev and I obviously were we're talking about it and whether we'd cover it and all that. And one of the things I remember Sheev saying to me was like, oh, maybe the show has a better chance of being good because because it's 100 years before. It is quite disconnected. Like, provided they keep to it being like a Sith storyline and they don't drop any giant canon breaks, it should be like a relatively easy open goal for them. Unfortunately, they didn't get that memo because they then dropped a bunch of massive lore breaks.
Yeah, I mean, even if it is going to be a show that is deeply connected to like specifically the prequels and the Phantom Menace, like there is no reason why it has to like it has to be hard, I guess, to keep canon with certain things that were established in those movies. Like literally, just as long as you don't break anything from what's been established in past installments, like just tell whatever story you want to tell and do it well. And don't contradict anything, and you're golden. You're fine. Hello?
My bad, I was muted.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, just had someone walk into my room. Yeah, so I don't know. Like I'm optimistic about this show. Like I don't know. Like I was optimistic going in. Like visuals have been really consistent, like you said. Like I have nothing to gripe with most of the visual. Like I think overall, like Star Wars is looking better and better in certain areas.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think this show has been a notable exception to what has been a fairly steady decline in video quality. Like Ahsoka and Book of Boba Fett and Mando season 3 look pretty bad.
What I would say is that, like, if I were an optimist, I would think maybe like the shortcomings of the past few shows, like in terms of visuals, could be chalked up to like really bad treatment of like VFX artists, not giving them enough time to do their jobs effectively, not spending their overly bloated budget efficiently, like that sort of thing. And that maybe like the industry has learned and reformatted, and maybe going forward it'll look better. But like I think the Acolyte is kind of the only thing, like obviously besides Andor, but that's its own thing. The Acolyte's like the only one that's shown any real improvement, and I don't think that's anywhere near a good sample size to make that conclusion.
And even then, even within the Acolyte, as much as I've just praised the way it looks, and I stick to this, a lot of the improvements in the visual quality have been down to just a better quality of cinematography rather than like VFX stuff. Like it's good that they've built actual sets, but there have been noticeably wonky moments.
If you stack it up even toward like the prequels, like the prequels clear visually and like in set design, costume design. I think it's fair to say that. And I'd say those are like the weakest. Like that might be the weakest trilogy in terms of VFX, right?
Oh yeah, probably.
So like I don't know, and obviously it's not entirely fair to judge a TV show next to a movie. However, budget-wise, these are all very big, expensive. Like Rings of Power is the most expensive TV show in the world, right? You'd think they could have made it look a little better. But there are a lot of moments that you notice where you're like, that's just CGI, and it's really bad and noticeable CGI.
Yeah, all that armor's made of paper mache.
So like I don't, the whole it's a TV show defense. I don't even know how far we can take that, because it's like, but it still has a really big budget.
Well, that's the thing. When people say like it's a TV show, I'm like, have you seen Westworld season 1? Because that looks incredible, and like that had a much smaller budget and much longer episodes than something like The Acolyte does. So I just don't buy that as an excuse. It's just. A lot of the reason for bad visual quality has been, as Chief said, crunch time of VFX artists, or like misuse of technology like the volume because it's cheaper. Like even again in the Acolyte, the lightsabers look noticeably like paler and like weaker looking than they did in the films. The handles are too big and too long, and the reason is because they're using the actual like the toy props.
Toys, yeah.
Rather than like the handles with the metal rods, the aluminium rods that were used in the movies, which look a lot better and are properly VFXed over. These just look a bit washed out and overly chonky.
Yeah, so I actually have to go now, but thanks talking to you guys. That was great.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no worries. It's good to have you, man.
All right. See you.
All right. Oops. Hang on. Sorry. Well, I guess you're in. I was gonna say, Jolly, you go ahead and start off with this one because I got to run to the bathroom real quick. Hello, overanalyzing Star Wars. You are on the air, and
Hey,
I am starting your timer. You have 30 minutes.
Yeah, no problem. What's going on, guys? I just wanted to
on.
come by. I'm a little late, but I love watching your guys' streams. I tune in a lot. I actually make some videos on the Clone Wars, and me and Chief definitely have some. Some people would say differing opinions, but I love watching your content. It's always well thought out. So just thought I'd try to join in late and see what you guys thought of the episode. I've kind of got an idea at this point how you guys feel about it, but maybe we can dive into it a little bit more.
Yeah, we didn't think it was good.
Yeah,
we thought it was pretty terrible.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I thought the first two episodes were kind of, maybe a little bit more interesting, but by the time the third one came around, I was just, I was less than impressed at the very least.
Yeah, it's been strange for us watching like the quality of the discourse on Twitter and like the things that people choose to focus on in particular when they criticize the show. Like you have, the obviously kind of nonsense culture war stuff, but you also have people being like, oh, flames in space are really bad, and I'm like, that's a really minor point. I'm much more concerned with the fact that the plot is an endless cavalcade of contrivances held together with duct tape.
Yeah,
that's a much bigger problem as far as I'm concerned.
Right. There's been, like you mentioned, the fire thing. It makes me laugh. You're braver than I am for being on Twitter. I've got to be honest with you. I kind of try and stay away from that landscape, but I would be interested.
That's because I'm French. I'm a glutton for punishment.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested to see what other people think of the show. I don't necessarily think, in terms of it breaking canon, I wouldn't say that maybe it breaks canon. It's just kind of a shame. It kind of dampens the canon that we do have, in the sense that, maybe there are other people in the universe that could create life or that sort of thing in order for Plagueis to kind of even remotely come close to that himself. Although in, the Plagueis novel, it's the Force responding back by creating Anakin. I just think it's mostly just watering down what already was portrayed in the prequels, and I'm not sure if that was intentional. It kind of seems to be the case with some of these shows, at least with the Acolyte, and with Kenobi too, in a different manner, of course, but just kind of watering down what already has been established in Star Wars, perhaps to create something new or to create something in what they might think is better. I'm not too sure. It's a little baffling at this point to watch all of this go down, and them trying to.
It is a little strange. I mean, like to address like the it doesn't break canon thing. Like Chief and I during the stream we've talked about why we think it does, and it's nothing to do necessarily with the use of the Force to create children. It's more to do with who knows what now, and how that can't possibly jive with what happens later.
Yeah.
But that's been talked to death. So like I actually want to concentrate on the last thing you just said, which is really interesting, which is the ways in which it like waters down what has happened already in the prequels and the OT. Like I think Anakin's character arc, I think, is the worst for this. There seems to be. I don't think it is deliberate, but like there is like an accidental campaign to just like undermine every single aspect of Anakin's character now.
Yeah, he failed to actually kill Palpatine or really stop the Empire from being a thing because they just kind of like went and hid.
He didn't.
A few decades.
He didn't destroy the Sith. He didn't kill Palpatine. He didn't really have any impact on the Empire's fall, other than like creating a power vacuum, which helps, but was not the major factor.
He apparently didn't redeem himself because he's half Anakin, half Vader. I think. Yeah. Still don't really know what to make of that.
Well, I showed you the quote right from, I can't remember which article it was. I think it might have been for Wired, where Dave Filoni literally was like, "Oh, I just view Vader as being like a part of Anakin." It's like, oh, so he wasn't redeemed then? Okay, cool.
Hate.
Yeah, great. And then of course, because he didn't do any of the things that were stipulated in the prophecy, he is now no longer the chosen one, which is, if you don't like the prophecy as an idea, sure, but it is there. It was a thing. His character arc was built with it in mind, and therefore it's going to undermine him to have it removed now, especially in the way it's been done.
Yeah, I guess I didn't really think about it in terms of the, what the Jedi would think in terms of the breaking canon, which of course I should have. I was more so just thinking of, them being able to create life in the first place, which when I first saw it, I was just so blown away. I was like, why would they even attempt to go down that road? And it does raise more questions in regards to how could Yoda and all of them, be aware of this kind of thing, especially in terms of how old they were when they apparently brought Osha when she was brought into the Jedi Order, and then for not even 100 years later. I guess I forgot about that one.
Maybe Saul was part of like a group of Jedi who were just having like a bet to see how old they could, how old they could get the council to accept as a Padawan. So like, Saul brings in an 8-year-old, and they're like, no, they're like, oh yeah, no, sure, maybe that's just on the.
Yariel Poof like found the lunch lady in the temple, and she's like 45, and he's like, she's got like a little bit of potential. Don't sleep on her.
Like, it's like Doris made a killer lasagna at lunch. Like you have to be force strong enough force to do that.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Joe Castanu would have a field day with that, I'm sure.
Maybe, well, for all we know, they found Jocastanu at that age.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, yeah. By the time Obi-Wan spoke to her in the library, she'd been there for like 6 months.
She was still a Padawan.
Oh gosh. Yeah, that is a shame. Yeah, it really is a shame. I'm not sure if I really wonder, honestly, at this point, if it's more of a deliberate step to maybe not erase, obviously, what had happened in the prequels and everything, because they still tote that as part of their canon and all of that stuff, but to kind of undermine it by creating something completely different. And I don't know. At this point, it's just sad to watch. I've never been one of those people like, oh, I'm gonna stop watching Disney Plus because I want to see if Star Wars, I wanted to at least see if Star Wars could come into a better place. But at this point, I think I'm just going to continue to be updated by the show via YouTubers, reviews, and everything like that. Because at the end of the day, if we want to see any kind of change, it really is just a matter of not supporting with Disney Plus and all that stuff and giving them our views and all that kind of thing. But yeah, it's just a shame at this point.
Yeah. That is absolutely the right mentality.
Is there a cat in the background?
Yeah, sorry about that. It really has no sense of.
No, it's okay. My cats are
manners.
behind me too, and they are the exact same way. You can just ask Jolly.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've heard them a couple. I really enjoy watching you guys stream together. Particularly your reviews, Sheev, of the Clone Wars. I make some content on the Clone Wars, mostly just like a comedic kind of watch party ish vibe, and giving details and stuff about what might be going on, like lore kind of things. But yeah, I always enjoy your takes on them.
I'll check out your channel.
Oh yeah, no, thanks, dude. Not to plug or anything.
No.
I just wanted to say how much I enjoy those kinds of content. But I do love watching you and Jolly stream. I actually joined very late, like almost every time, because my YouTube notifications are somehow always like an hour behind on when you guys go live.
Oh yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm glad you can make it at all, man. It's good to have you here.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely don't want to take up too much time. I know it's pretty late in the stream. I'm sure there might be one more person I think you guys mentioned that you would have on, but I just wanted to say how much I enjoy your guys' content, and I look forward to the next one as well.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
The next one will be what? July is when we do the next breakdown.
I think if we're doing it on Sunday, like we usually do, then it'll be June 30th.
Okay.
Right at the end of the month.
Oh, good to know, man. I hope the show turns out a little bit better. I hope I am wrong. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to be the case. But yeah, I guess we'll see.
No, I'm sure these last several episodes will be great.
Yeah, they're going to fix everything.
Can you imagine if we had like another 2 episodes and then the start of like the penultimate episode or the final episode is just Osha waking back up on the snow in that ship?
Yeah, to see the critical drinker come back and be like, you know what, I was wrong about the Acolyte. I would just about lose it.
Drinker admit that he was wrong about something. That'll be the day.
The entire final episode is just full of white men.
Oh yeah, I do think it's kind of weird that they chose to do Torben in that Death the Way. I mean, not to get too political, but yeah, of course it had to be Torben, and it couldn't have been any of the other Jedis. But I'm sure that was not intentional.
Well, you don't know. Maybe the next episode will have like Kelnaka hang himself from a tree. Anything's possible at this point.
Torben is another reason why, like, I know there has to be more to the story, right? Because he felt so guilty about whatever the hell went down on Bryndock that he fucking killed himself for it.
Yeah,
and
well,
what we're shown in this episode is like he didn't do anything. He was just there.
If I remember correctly, in one of the trailers, for like a brief moment, there was like what looked like a fight scene between I always forget the Wookiee Jedi.
Kilnaka, yeah, it looks like Kilnaka's gonna scratch his face up pretty good.
Yeah, clearly there is something else. I'm just at this point not sure how they can even justify and bring it all around, but hopefully it doesn't completely break everything in its wake.
Torben will lean into Kilnaka and whisper your mum joke in his ear.
Yeah. Well, anyways, yeah. Thanks again, guys. I really enjoy your content, and glad to be on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, it was good to have you on, man.
Thanks, man. Take care, guys.
Good night.
Bye.
All right, so we do have one more person that was going to be on earlier, but then his mic bugged out. So he told me in DMs that he has like just one disagreement that he wants to go over. So we'll have him on real quick, and then we'll try to kind of find a natural closing point to the stream. Hello, Wisdom. Do you
Hello.
have...
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hello. All right, perfect. Good evening, Jolly. Good evening, Master Chief. It was just one thing I thought with the Trinity actress being there, and I don't think they're actually going for it, but rather than there being the chosen one, like in the Matrix, the one, every era has their own chosen one. Because yes, Darth Vader in the original series killed Emperor Palpatine and restored balance to the universe, but then later on, Cole had his issues with the one Sith, and then Jaina had to kill her brother. I know these books aren't canon, and I know that's not what they're going for, but I was just saying, like, hopefully, squint, cross the fingers, is like maybe that's what they're trying to do. But how the witches made the twins, no, I have no idea. That's just screwy.
Well, if it's like a several generations at a time, we'll have like a chosen one. Like, say it's Osha and May, and then it's Anakin, and then it's Rey or whatever. Like, at that point when Anakin does get brought to the temple, Qui-Gon's like, I think this is the chosen one. It's like, already? Didn't we just have one like 100 years ago? Nope, yeah, but there was one like 70 years before that. So like, there's precedent. It's like, oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, no, the Jedi not recognizing like, oh, great darkness is coming. Maybe we need a savior. That's There's not there also, for that. You're right.
There's also the thing of like, if considering that part of the prophecy, as far as the Jedi understand it, is that the chosen one kills the Sith. Will end the Sith. Does that mean the Sith have been ended like once every 100 years? And did
Osha like end them, and then like I guess somehow like then the post credit scene is Plagueis coming in and picking up the Sith Lord's mask and going, I will carry on the legacy. I will finish what you started.
No, you're absolutely right. One question about that though, with the what's Luke's nephew's name that Jaina kills? I can't remember his name. Jason. Yeah, Jason. He was Sith, or he called himself Sith Darth Caedus or whatever, but he wasn't part of the Bane Sith. So, do you guys feel like that? Him becoming Sith and him doing his own Jedi Civil War, that also would have invalidated Anakin Skywalker's legacy?
I mean, I'm on record as saying that the EU has plenty of stuff I disagree with.
Yeah, the EU kind of made it a thing where like the Sith never really left. Like even there wasn't even like a period where Palpatine was dead, and there was like at least a few years where there were no other Sith running around. Because first of all, Palpatine himself came back, but then also you had like Darth Krayt training with Zozan on Korriban, and you had like you just had all these different like Sith in hiding or like whatever, what have you.
Well.
Lumaya was like a Sith acolyte, I think. I don't know if she was like an official apprentice or whatever.
Well, yeah, I guess that's how they justify it. It was like, well, Caedus wasn't really a Baneite Sith because he was taught by Lumaya, not a real Baneite.
But
Sith.
He was still a Sith.
But I guess they were like in name only, and I'm like, yeah, but what's the difference at this point?
Well, okay, yeah, but like, let's say this prophecy was written like after when the Baneite Sith came to exist, like when the Sith were presumed extinct. Like the Jedi are reading this prophecy, like, what the fuck? The Sith aren't even a thing. What? So like, I would assume the prophecy was created before the quote unquote extinction of the Sith, right? Implying that it's not just limited to Baneite Sith that the chosen one has to destroy. It's all of them.
Well,
no matter
I think
where they come from.
I think the Sith thing isn't even mentioned in the prophecy, right? The prophecy just they'll bring balance to the Force. It's just that the Jedi go, well, the dark side inherently is an imbalance, and the Sith are darksiders. So the only way to bring balance would be to kill or delete the order of the Sith.
You were supposed to destroy the Sith, not join them. I wonder if there's like because we talk already about like why they don't go after the Night Sisters, why they're going after dark side factions and all that, and it's like. Maybe they do have this understanding of the Force of like the only way balance can be achieved is if there are no dark side factions. So like even if the Sith are destroyed, there are other darksiders out there, right? That are just like perverting the nature of the Force. So balance isn't really achieved, right?
Well, yeah, I guess that's the thing was like I imagine they were like Anakin will create a galaxy where there are no Night Sisters, or at least the Night Sisters are turned back to the light or whatever. Like it's almost like a Jesus will come back and everyone who was a Muslim or a Hindu or whatever will just miraculously find the light. I guess that's what they're going for with the Messiah prophecy. Just a miraculous conversion experience where everyone subscribes to Jedi philosophy, which obviously doesn't happen, and would be insane if it did. So, but yeah, I guess that's what they think. I mean, they are a religious order after all. There's only so much logic I'm looking for.
Sure, but if that's the case, then like the whole destroying the Sith thing is a Jedi invented like aspect of the Chosen One prophecy that like the idea that Anakin failed to actually destroy the Sith doesn't, I guess, mean that he didn't fulfill whatever destiny he had, right?
it would just be that the Sith are inherently an order that is a dark side perverting order. Like, and I don't think you could ever, like, if you redeemed a Sith, they would just no longer be a Sith. If you brought them to the light, they wouldn't be Sith anymore. Whereas I guess you could theoretically have light side Night Sisters, and they'd still be like Night Sisters by culture.
Okay, but like, I think it's absurd as a premise to say that one being destroys all who wield the dark side in any capacity, like ever.
I agree, but this is a religious thing. I'd also say it's completely mental to say that Jesus will convince every Hindu to drop their gods when he comes back at the end of time.
You see, he'll simply mind control them with his awesome power.
Yikes.
He'll lay out. He'll beat them with facts and logic.
You see, because I was going to say, like, I guess the idea is that every Muslim and Hindu will see Jesus and be like, well, I guess we can't really deny it now. But, like, also humans are humans, so yes, they would.
Yeah, also, like, Jesus is a prophet in Islam. Like, he's the second most important prophet of Islam. So he'd be like, I'm back, guys. And they're like, oh, cool. Yeah, we thought you would be. And it's like, so you're Christians now, right? I was like, no, we're still Muslims.
Yeah, exactly. They'd be like, oh, this doesn't actually mean... There's so many different Christian denominations that it's kind of absurd that any single one of them is like, we have the exact right answers.
It's like the Rowan Atkinson joke of everyone going to hell and the devil being like, yeah, I'm sorry, the Jews were right.
With the Chosen One prophecy, as much as I hate it, do we know where it came from? Do we know why? Because, of course, the Jedi, well, like any other prophecy, they believe, oh, it's talking to us specifically. And yes, the Force being, as you were saying, the way the path, the way the galaxy is supposed to fit together. Why the Jedi could have just, even Yoda, I think in episode 3 was like misinterpreted. A prophecy could have been, but that's just me throwing sludge over the prequels, so never mind.
I mean, to be fair to the prequels, I don't think it's a part of the prophecy that he's going to have to be a Jedi, because when Qui-Gon's like, I found the Chosen One, Yoda's like, oh, train as a Jedi you want for him, which implies that like that wasn't just a foregone conclusion. I think it's much more just like generically these light side Force groups are like, oh yes, I must, we're going to have a Messiah and he'll bring about the good times where there are no evil people and everyone's in tune with nature.
Well, yeah, but I guess
the
like
Jedi
the Jedi Order,
Jedi because we're right.
Yeah, the Jedi Order would be like, well, if there is a Chosen One, if he ever actually does come to exist, like obviously he's going to be one of us because we're the good and virtuous Order who are completely in step with the Force, and
right,
what we say goes.
An example of the arrogance of the Jedi that they think they're the only ones with the right answers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but the new one and all the cycles thing, that was my only thought, and like I said, when I just saw the Trinity actors, I was like, maybe, but that was it. That was my little take.
I didn't even piece that together. I forgot that they had Trinity from the Matrix, and that like that's obviously another like popular movie that has a Chosen One prophecy.
Yeah, a fake Chosen One prophecy as well. It's deliberately not true.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say I'm slightly sad that we didn't get a bullet time scene with the Trinity actress.
Dodging knives, yeah, that would have been cool.
Time knife.
Yeah, dodging. Just actually, to be fair, you could even do the Neo thing of like catching bullets in midair, right, with laser bolts, because we literally saw Kylo and Vader do that.
Mm-hmm. Wait, when did Vader do that?
He caught blaster bolts in his gauntlet in Empire Strikes Back and in Rogue One, which I guess is the same power, right?
Yeah, I guess it is. Well, I mean, I think it's a different power than Kylo. Like Kylo's is literally just stopping it, whereas what Vader does, I think, is similar to what Yoda's catching the Force lightning in his hand. It's the same power.
Oh yeah, okay, fair. But like, I mean, also Maul moves the blaster, like Bo's blaster shots aside in Siege of Mandalore.
I was about to say that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
I'm fine with as a power. I think that's fair. I think it's allowed.
I mean, it's plasma, not laser,
plasma
right?
bolts have mass. Yeah, it has mass.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We should be able to grab it.
Well, I mean, we talk about like you shouldn't be able to pull a ship out of the sky because it's A, very massive, and B, moving very fast. So like, there's got to be like a limit to how quickly something can move that like a Force user just can't stop it.
Right, but it's a combined energy thing because the reason like speed matters is that it increases the total energy you have, and mass is energy. Like with the plasma bolts, yeah, it's moving very quick and it's very hot, but like there's barely anything there in terms of mass. It's like essentially just less than air. Like it's super hot air. It's less dense than the air. So yeah, it's basically just a very fast moving fart, basically.
Yeah. Okay, you fucking nerd. So Wisdom, was that all you wanted to get off your chest?
Yeah, just the one thing. I just wanted to bring it up and talk about it.
All right. Well,
Sheev, you'll love that last comment on the chat.
What was said?
Colourful abyss.
Boy, do I have a video for you. I'm not gonna plug my own video, but that's not what size matters not means. Ugh. Anyway, if that's all, then Jolly, was there anything else like an argument that you don't think we've been able to go over yet that you want addressed?
No, I think we've addressed pretty much all of it. That's anything that's specific rather to episode 3. I think we've addressed. The rest of it is just going to have to wait on context because this was a very vague episode, almost insultingly so, almost like a waste of our time. It was so vague. They really need to pull a rabbit out of a hat to make this retrospectively not a waste of their time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just like what a weird way to structure an 8-episode show. Or like you have an entire episode dedicated to flashbacks that doesn't even really tell us anything. So now you have to give us more information and devote more time to filling in the gaps when you already have your own present day storyline and its own mystery that you're trying to get us to invest in. It's just terribly structured. Not a good choice. Don't know why they did that.
Counterpoint. No.
I guess I would even compare it to Bly Manor again, because Bly Manor has an entire episode dedicated to a flashback that kind of explains why everything has been happening the way that it is. But it's in the penultimate episode, which arguably, yes, can halt the pacing a little bit because we've just had a climactic point that we've reached, and then we stop and we just halt in place and go into a bunch of backstory. And then the episode after that is when we pick up on that cliffhanger. But at the same time, all that information is necessary. There kind of wasn't really any other way to tell it to us. And they picked probably the best time to insert that in. I don't know where else you would put that without just giving away the store immediately.
Sorry, I don't know if this is true. Someone in chat said the Acolyte's going to have another season. Is this true?
Oh my!
Please tell me this is not true.
I'm pretty sure that they've been talking about that, but I don't know if that's ever been confirmed.
Oh my god! Please no. This is like Kenobi season 2. Please, I just no, stop.
I feel like the threat of Kenobi season 2, right? That's never going to happen, but it keeps periodically being brought up by Lucasfilm officials as a maybe, just to keep that threat looming over my head.
Yeah, I was supposed to say, do you think they intend it as a threat? Where they bring out the Acolyte and it was boo, it sucks. And they're careful guys, you keep booing stuff. We might have to take drastic action. I'm no, it's great. It's great.
Ewan McGregor's right behind the curtain, peeking out.
Yeah, he's you won't like us when we're angry.
Right. So before we close out, I had 2 more super chats that I wanted to go over, and then we can stop talking forever. One from Larry Banks, who we just had on for $5. Thank you for the super chat, Larry. What's funny is that the bridging is so bad that anti-fans are down to voting Acolyte's 2009 movie, and the audience reviews think that movie is the show. Oh, they're downvoting the 2009 Acolyte movie. Is there a 2009 movie called Acolyte? Because if there is, I don't know about it.
I guess so. Yeah, I guess this is just a commentary on how toxic everything's gotten with people just.
Yeah, the thing is, I try to stay out of review bombing discussions because first of all, I consider Rotten Tomatoes and basically any other website that tells you a movie score that you should pay attention to if you want to watch that. I just think they're useless. I don't think they ever really reflect the quality of a movie, or if they do, it's very rare. So review bombing means nothing to me.
That's the thing. It's handing, when it comes to whether or not you think a movie is good, that should come from, and you haven't seen it, right? And who you're going to trust. It should come from 2 places: word of mouth and critics you trust. Mm-hmm. Handing over that whole process to an opaque algorithm owned by a corporation that's prone to manipulation, and which actual evidence has been presented that is driven by bought bots, it just becomes worthless. If you're getting movie advice about what to watch from something like Rotten Tomatoes, then maybe don't.
Yeah, don't, because again, review bombing is a thing that is done. There is evidence that it's been done in the past for a lot of different things. So you can't really ever trust the audience score for any given thing. And the
I particularly like the reviews. I particularly like the reviews you see on Rotten Tomatoes that are porn and bio. I think those are really profound.
Mm-hmm. But I think critics can also be bought, and we've seen this with examples of that too. So you'll typically see I don't know if they still do this as much, but Disney would often have really high critic scores on basically any movie that they made, be it a Marvel movie, a Star Wars movie, what have you. And you can clearly tell that critics outside of Rotten Tomatoes, if you're looking at their reviews, they're saying it's bad, like this new Star Wars movie is bad, but like, so, oh, well, on Rotten Tomatoes, it has an 89%. What gives? And it's like, yeah, critics can be bought. And of course, there's good reason to buy critics off, because then those critics that are generally trusted by the populace are going to be like, hey, go watch this movie. And then boom, that gets more butts in seats. So like, it's just a rigged system from all angles, and you should just trust your own opinion and the opinions of people that you can verify because they've given you good advice in the past.
Your eyes can deceive you. Don't trust them.
It's almost like as an audience, we need to become better critics of critics. Like we need to be good. We need to get good at judging when a critic is actually acting in good faith and in our own best interests, rather than because they're paid to. Mm-hmm. There's actually like 3 really interesting pieces of information on this, which is the Acolyte premiere. Like a bunch of influencers got invited to that, which, like, obviously, but also that should tell you something about the way in which Disney approached this. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, I don't want to reveal the source because they asked me not to, but I have a friend who has friends who work within Disney and within Star Wars and Disney, who have said to me that, like, yeah, the members of the story group, the Lucasfilm story group, literally have open group chats with a bunch of influencers, and they try and prime them for like oh, stay on our good side and we'll give you this content ahead of time. And then for those who are really interested in this kind of rabbit hole, Jenny Nicholson just put out a very good video about the death of the Star Wars Hotel in Galaxy's Edge. And one of the things she points out, which is really interesting, is you can always tell when an influencer has been bought for Star Wars because they'll refer to the theme park ride by the full official licensed name, rather than any like real, rather than the colloquial ways people actually refer to it, because those are the titles that
they don't say I went to Star Wars Land and it was really fun and I got blue milk. They say I went to Star Wars Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland Resort in hotel
at Mowinton's Canteen or whatever, and like then whatever will crop up on the search engine basically.
Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed making my own FX lightsaber at this parlor, stuff like that, and it sounds very clunky because they didn't write it. They're just reading off a piece of paper that some executive gave them, and you can just tell.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Be cautious when approaching critics and review sites.
Yeah. And then one more super chat from Reskov for $5. Thank you for the super chat. It would be funny if the Acolyte went on a mid-season hiatus after episode 4 for emergency reshoots after watching the stream.
To have that kind of power.
I wish I had that much influence. Like, imagine if instead of like focus group testing and like getting all the influencers to just like be your hype men, basically. Imagine if they watched people like us or not to toot our own horn or anything, but like generally like influencers who actually are trying to analyze and improve upon the media they're assessing and like the storytelling they're in. And if they were like, what if they invited people like them to come look at their show and be like, so does this work? And you just be like, nope, I have all these notes here, improve on this, and then they could just like rework it accordingly.
Well,
wouldn't that be fun?
We're just the grifters, so we'll never be invited on. That's it's an easy dismissal. Like we made that joke obviously a while back in private calls where we're like, rather than have like this Lucasfilm story group or whatever, like if we could wish for any change to the way in which they do it, it's just like put someone like us in the room whose only job is to hold like a bamboo stick, and every time someone says something stupid, you just whack them on the knuckles. You're like, no, bad, no, do it again. And they're just allowed to veto any 3 ideas without debates. Like, Dave Filoni could be like, man, I was thinking for Ahsoka season 2, we have like Ahsoka like turn into a giant turtle and then like endow Sabine with powers like in Avatar, and you just go, no, vetoed.
I wouldn't even use my veto on that one. I would just look at him and be like, is that really what you want to do, or are you just fucking with me?
Just burn the hat and hope to save him. Like you're possessed, Dave. It'll be like a thing. It'll scream and change form.
You're just like, I don't actually. You like look him dead in the eye, and you're like, I don't actually believe that that's what you want. I think you're just trying to use up my veto points. And he just kind of like sulks, and he's like, it's not what I want.
You're like a children's therapist where he like says something insane. You're like, now, do you want to do that because you actually want it, or are you trying to prove to your father that you're worthy of his love? He just breaks down. It's like, I'm sorry. Sorry.
He just has like a picture of George in his wallet.
Yeah, it's like, I was the hand-picked apprentice. And George walks in and is like, who are you? I don't remember you.
He's like, Dale, right? It's Dave. We went for lunch last week.
He's like, we did? Oh, damn. I remember. I just remember going to lunch with a hat.
The hat did all the talking. The hat's
It's
name
like
is
Venom.
also Dave, but no relation.
It's just like Venom, where he's like, "We are Stetson."
Right then. So that was the thing. That was the stream that we did. I don't know why I can't word today. So
Me word
Wisdom.
good. Thank audience for attendal.
Yes, thank you, Wisdom, for coming on just to kind of give us one last bit of pushback. I can't say I was overly convinced by a lot of the arguments made, but I at least appreciate that we had reasonable discussions with people, and it wasn't just shit slinging, which is what I kind of was afraid of with a few of them for a second there.
That's the thing. Like with streams like this, the intention is never to convince, to argue people out of something. I mean, it's nice if we can come to a mutual conclusion, but really what matters is that we have a civilized discussion where people are willing to listen to the other person's perspective.
As long as all the arguments are laid out, then people can form their own opinions, right? Like if all the information is laid bare, right? Like every reference pointed to, and that's the ideal goal. Not to say that that's how it always happens, but hey. I trust you guys.
I've got enough information to form my own opinion. It's going to be a good opinion, right?
It's going to be a good opinion, right?
All right. Well, au revoir, and thank you very much, everyone, for coming along. And we'll see you on the 30th of June, I guess. Have a great rest of the summer. Well, not the summer, rest of the June. Hopefully, the weather will improve.
My June.
All right. Night, everyone. Bye.
Night, guys. Bye. Ending the stream.